Chapter 210, Qingshu Tribe. Chapter 210, Qingshu Tribe. The snowstorm was still raging the next day at the hour of Mao, and the charcoal braziers in the military tents had all gone cold. Various generals gathered around a map on the table in the tent and waited for Xiao Qie to speak. The battle over at the Chaucer sinkhole was not considered a tough fight, but it was rather perilous. Xiao Qie took advantage of the snowstorm and led Qi away on ice from the southeast to the Chaucer sinkhole, where the deployment of Bianxia troops was relatively weak. Qi's reinforcement troops came so quickly because there was still a relay station in Duanzhou, but as he had shifted his focus to the southeast and was helpless against Xiao Qie's Libei armored cavalry, he gave Tantai, who always had his eyes on the movements in Duanzhou, the opportunity to provide diagonal support. Xiao Qie had already removed his armor last night. After the military medic withdrew from the tent, he moved his shoulders and arms a little and looked around at them. "We are not here this time to fight a showdown battle with them, but to wrest Duanzhou from them. Now that Qi is dead and a large number of their troops are still stationed in the northeast, the number of troops in Duanzhou is less than 10,000. It's an excellent opportunity." Fei Xing brought the medicine to Shen Zichuan and stole a few glances at the latter, noting the prefectural lord to be in passable spirits. "Quite a number of cavalrymen escaped yesterday." Yin Chong pressed a finger down to the southeast of Duanzhou. "The troops here will suspect we are going to attack Duanzhou once they receive the news. They will definitely move to intercept us first." The old man feared no one during military discussions. He even casually tied his messy beard together. It was just that he did not dare to drink in Shen Zichuan's and Xiao Qie's presence, and could only rely on strong tea to satisfy his cravings. Xiao Qie did not reply immediately. Instead, he left the opportunity to Tantai Hu. In these 2 years, Tantai Hu had gradually come to gain some insights and opinions of his own. He pondered over the second master's meaning and raised a hand to point at Duanzhou's location. "We are now at the Chaucer sinkhole, which is some distance away from Duanzhou. If the troops in the southeast come here to intercept us, then the military strength in the city of Duanzhou will remain unchanged." He looked at Xiao Qie with some apprehension and continued when he saw Xiao Qie's neutral expression. "Get Wu Ziyu, who is stationed in Mount Luo, to make a detour to the west gate of Duanzhou when that happens, and we will be able to launch a surprise attack directly." Xiao Qie nodded as an indication that Tantai Hu was right. With a slightly heavy expression, Gu Jin looked at the Chaucer River and said, "We can lure all the troops to the Chaucer sinkhole by being bait, but master, the Chaucer River lies right behind us. The moment Amur seizes the opportunity to mobilize troops for a sneak attack, or if Hassan is deployed over from the south, then we will end up being attacked from the front and rear. By then, Wu Ziyu would have already gone around to the west of Duanzhou. We will be left without reinforcements. By saying that, you're breaking the hearts of those in the war zone." Xiao Qie watched Shen Zichuan drink his medicine in between speaking. When he was done, he continued, "Is the Shaosan camp not reinforcement?" Gu Jin paused for a moment, then shook his head. "I can't trust Guowei." Xiao Qie did not continue the thread of conversation. He raised his hand and patted Gu Jin lightly on his back. "My eldest brother has a clear view of the situation from where he is in dying. We must obtain Duanzhou at all costs. There's still Lu Guangbai and Shifu on the battleground. The 3 great camps will certainly do their best to stall Hassan. As for Amur," Xiao Qie smiled derisively. "The tribe he can deploy at such urgent notice is the Qingshu tribe." Qi Juin wanted to send troops to attack the Qingshu tribe. The Empress Dowager and the Ministry of War did not consent, but did that mean there was absolutely nothing she could do about it? Qidong's military provisions are being supplied by the Yan clan, and the carriages are already heading for the Zijuan commandery 3 days ago. All Shen Zichuan could taste in his mouth was bitterness. Commander-in-Chief Qi should have already eaten her fill by now. As long as they could let Qi Juin eat her fill, she would dare to play games with Kudu. She did not venture into the capital the last few years to contend with those wily old foxes because she did not want to go looking for trouble. But now that the scimitars were almost right before her eyes, all those concerns went flying out of the windows. The speed of the cavalry's advancement in the snow is not as fast as it usually is. We still have time here to prepare, Xiaoqia said. The current campground is rather rudimentary. Have the Dunzhou garrison troops dig horizontal trenches in the vast expanse of open ground. Take turns to carry out night patrol duty, and send the falcons out for reconnaissance too. The Imperial Army and Libei armored cavalry have been fighting hard for several days, so rest up whenever possible. We have to conserve our strength and stall the enemies long enough for Wuziu. With the heavy snow obstructing the roads, it would be too late to deliver the message on horseback to Mount Luo. The good thing was that the Libei armored cavalry all brought along their own falcons, which could deliver the message by flying northwest for a few hours. Everyone responded in the affirmative. When they started to discuss among themselves, Xiaoqia reached under the clothes on his chest and groped around for a moment. Shen Zichuan set down the medicine bowl and grasped the folding fan in his sleeves when something suddenly sprang onto him between his sleeve. He fixed his eyes on it. It was a piece of candy wrapped in oil paper. Xiaoqia looked at the map with a straight face, looking as if he was not the one who had done it. Wu Ziyu slept in Mount Luo until he was awakened by the deputy general at midnight. He opened the letter the falcon delivered, read it by the candlelight in the tent, and was instantly wide awake. Not even daring to sleep anymore, he rose to put on his armor. "Where's that Yen Haru?" He had only just said that when Yen Haru popped his head out from the side of the hanging screen and answered, "Here." Wu Ziyu clutched the letter and said gruffly, "Is everyone dead? How can you let him enter as he wishes?" Come on now, don't be mad." Yen Haru made his way in with his hands around his little golden abacus. "His lordship told me to wait here, so I did. What can I do, man? Master Wu, aren't you being a tad too cautious? Marching troops to war is different from merchants transporting goods. If something goes awry, we will literally lose our heads." Wu Ziyu had dealt with the Mount Luo bandits before when he was preparing military provisions for the Libei armored cavalry last year, so he was not flustered to encounter those like Yen Haru. He put away the letter first before saying, "I'm going to mobilize troops soon. The Mount Luo bandits have only just been eradicated, so it doesn't reassure me to leave you here. Let's do this. Go and pack up quickly. You'll be leaving with me." Yen Haru had conducted deals with the Bianxia people before. There would be no one to watch him if they were to leave him in Mount Luo, and Wu Ziyu found it inappropriate. He had to keep an eye on him. Yen Haru was so frightened that his face turned a shade whiter. Hugging his abacus to his chest, he followed behind Wu Ziyu and said, "Blades and swords have no eyes, Master Wu. Why are you taking me with you? My family's businesses all depend on me, so I can't have anything happen to me. You know about Qidong's military provisions? I'm the one delivering them now. I'll just stay behind. Or how about you assign someone to send me back to Cizhou? Dunzhou is fine too. Don't tell me we aren't capable of protecting you given how many soldiers we have." Wu Ziyu bared his frightfully white teeth at Yen Haru. "I'll send you back after the battle. You won't go wrong going with the prefectural lord. I assure you it will not hold up your affairs." Then, without waiting for Yen Haru's reply, he yelled for the guard outside to stuff Yen Haru into the horse carriage and secured him to take him away with the troops. Wu Ziyu exhaled deeply at the entrance of the tent. It was dark. He took out the crumpled letter earlier to read through it again. The candlelight from the tent fell upon his back. He stared blankly at the word "surprise attack" for a long time. Launching a surprise attack on Duanzhou concerned Xiaoqia's safety. This battle had to be fought not only quickly but also steadily. Two men who were inextricably linked to the war situation were now both at the Chaucer sinkhole, and Wu Ziyu could not afford to take responsibility for the loss of either one of them. He had to shoulder the load of this weight. But I'm just an escort in the convoy squad. Deep creases formed between Wu Ziyu's brows as he frowned. He gazed out through the long night and recalled the first time he met Xiaoqie. Aren't you the Li Bei armored cavalry? Under the blazing sun, Xiaoqie partially looked back with eyes deep and quiet. To this day, Wu Ziyu still did not dare to answer Xiaoqie. He seemed to have tacitly agreed that all he could do was to escort the supply wagons, but at the same time, he was loath to accept it. In his early years, he had been sent to Bianbo camp as a punishment by Xiao Jiming for drinking on the job. He watched as Zhao Hui became the commanding general of the 3 great training divisions of Luoyang, and now he was watching as Chen Yang and Gu Jin were successively entrusted with heavy responsibilities. Meanwhile, Xiaoqie held him back in Bianbo camp, never putting him at the forefront. Wu Ziyu spat and stuffed the letter back into his bosom. He took 2 steps in the snow before suddenly leaping up and swinging his clenched fists around in the air a few times. Since Xiaoqie dared to give him the opportunity, then he would dare to stake his life and all that he held dear to fight a battle for second master. The snow gradually lightened at the hour of Yu the next day. Xiaoqie put on his heavy armor in the military tent. His armor had taken some damage from the assaults of the iron hammers the day before. The left and right arms were the most severely battered, especially the left arm which had repeatedly taken the brunt of Hei's iron hammers. It was even somewhat dented. Wu Ziyu has already arrived at the western side of Duanzhou. Last through this night, and we will be able to make a simultaneous attack from the front and back with him tomorrow morning. Xiaoqie appeared visibly taller when he was in armor, so much so that he was almost blocking off all the light before Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan sat on the plank bed. In the eyes of the others, his presence here had a far deeper purpose. Xiao Jiming's current daringness to pull out all the stops and let the 3 great camps in the war zone assist Zhongbua in the Battle of Duanzhou was not just because Xiaoqie was here, but also because Shen Zichuan was here. This was the sincerity Li Bei saw. Fei Xing, in leading the imperial bodyguards to follow after Haragu, can make up for the temporary lack of scouts. Shen Zichuan looked on as Xiaoqie put on his arm guard. If you don't come back tomorrow, then the remaining troops will be put at the forefront of the battle. The troops that Xiaoqie left behind were meant to serve as a protective barrier for Shen Zichuan. If something unexpected were to happen, these people would escort Shen Zichuan up north. When the time came, Shasen camp would naturally come to receive him. Xiaoqie's hand that had been securing the arm guard paused slightly. He looked at Shen Zichuan, understanding what Shen Zichuan meant. Shen Zichuan motioned for Xiaoqie to squat down. It was inconvenient for Xiaoqie to squat in his armor, so he simply withdrew a leg and kneeled on one knee on a spot near Lanzhou. Snow outside the tent fell like light willow catkins. Intermittent sounds of Fei Xing lecturing Yin Chang about his drinking drifted through the air. Meanwhile, the Li Bei armored cavalry in their heavy armor stepped in the snow and moved in concert with one another. It was noisy all around. Inside the tent, tea that had been set above the charcoal brazier with firewood burning in it started to boil. The expression in Xiaoqie's eyes was penetrating. Of late, the dazzling brilliance of his talent was becoming harder and harder to conceal. Wait for me here. As a matter of fact, I would like to go. Shen Zichuan's overcoat slipped off his shoulders. Imitating Xiaoqie's past action, he pinched Xiaoqie's chin and cocked his head slightly. But I don't have that capability. All I can do is to remain here as the wife who shares hardships with his husband. Xiaoqie, who had been letting Shen Zichuan pinch as he wished, burst out laughing on hearing him. Shen Zichuan listened as Gu Jin stopped outside the tent. He took the helmet over and put it on for Xiaoqie. In that brief exchange of glances, he and Xiaoqie exchanged a kiss across the steel. After tonight, Xiaoqie's icy iron fingers caressed Shen Zichuan's cheeks, his voice low and deep as he said, My Lanzhou will be the overlord of Zhongbua. Xiao Qia tested his new blade on He, but it was far from enough. He was so ravenous he could devour the north and south battlefields. Every battle was a trial. He wanted to hone his blade even faster here. The Biancha's massive troops in the southeast numbered 25,000, of which 5,000 were the Scorpions. The remaining cavalrymen lacked horses, so many of them could only stand in temporarily as infantrymen. They lost their commanding general, and they were unable to obtain updates from the opposite bank of the Chaosha River. Obstructing Xiao Qia was a measure they were forced to take in order to ensure the safety of Duanzhou. What Xiao Qia wanted was for them to be forced into doing so. Once these 25,000 men moved, the western side of Duanzhou would be completely vacated, and Wu Ziyu could immediately begin his attack on the city. The advantage in having Shen Zichuan seal off Zhongbua would then become apparent. Duanzhou would not get any form of assistance, and since their grains had already been supplied to He's 20,000 soldiers, the 8,000 troops remaining behind to keep guard on Duanzhou would all have to meet the enemy's attack on empty stomachs. When the battle in Zhongbua started, it was in the dead of night over at the Bianjuan commandery. News of He's defeat had yet to make it to the Qinshu tribe, whose night patrol squad was presently roaming around the Bianjuan commandery. The commanding general of the Qinshu tribe was called Sumeng, who used to be Hassan's deputy general and could also partake in the discussion of official affairs when he was under Amur command. But because his tribe was not powerful enough, he lost the opportunity to follow Hassan up north. He had also crossed swords with Lu Guangbai here before. The Bianjuan commandery was devoid of snow tonight. From afar, Suatian Pass looked like a sleeping beauty lying in slumber upon the city. There were bits of floating snow in the air, while no trace of the moon could be seen when one raised their head. Sumeng felt the Bianjuan commandery to be too silent tonight. It made him feel ill at ease, so he increased the number of people on night patrol, keeping all eyes on the eastern front of the Bianjuan commandery in case of a surprise attack from the garrison troops. During the latter half of the night patrol squad set up a bonfire in the wilderness, where they filled their stomachs with melted snow as they roasted the dried meat jerky they carried with them. The Scorpions in the north have been winning battles, a cavalryman of the Qinshu tribe said in the Biancha tongue as he broke off the dried meat jerky. They're about to merge into the 12 tribes and become a tribe near the north. By then, will we still be able to get our hands on provisions? Sumeng drank the melted snow, shaking his head as he said, "The hero will never allow the Scorpions to become a tribe of their own. They are the slaves of the Liaoying tribe." The mothers of the Scorpions were all natives of Dazhou, and with the emergence of traitors like Harigu, it would be difficult to convince the masses even if they were victorious in battles. Moreover, the person who all the tribes in the desert answered to was Hassan. "If they can give us Gedale," the cavalryman smiled at Sumeng, "then we won't have to worry about starving in the future anymore." Sumeng gulped down the melted snow and did not answer immediately. He had sounded Amur out before, but did not receive a response. The Qinshu tribe was not a powerful tribe, and the Liaoying tribe of today was no longer the minor tribe it had been in the past. In addition, the Huiyan tribe had thrown in their lot with Li Bei, leaving their Qinshu tribe behind here to choke on sand with the Bianjuan garrison troop. But who would have expected the Bianjuan commandery garrison troops themselves to take off in the end? After being stationed here day in and day out, Sumeng could not see a future. He pinned all his hopes on his son, but as it happened, his son came to a premature end at the beginning of spring this year. "There is purpose in waiting." These were the only words of comfort Sumeng could offer. "At least we won't face reprisals from Li Bei if we stay here." The cavalryman burst into laughter. Halfway through the bonfire, a cavalryman saw several stray dogs behind him. He brandished a withered branch at them and shooed at them to drive them away. But these stray dogs were so starving they were drooling and panting warm air as they circled the cavalry. "Chase them away," Sumeng ordered. So the cavalryman stood up, grabbed his scimitar, and started to stomp his feet as well. The stray dogs cowered back for a moment, and the cavalryman, with his bulging belly, turned back to suggest to Summing, "We can hunt them. Dogskins can." Before the cavalryman could finish his words, the stray dogs pounced. It was as though they had gone mad as they tore at the cavalryman with their fangs and dragged him with such force that he fell over to the ground. The dogs latched onto his arm that had been holding onto the scimitar. The leather could not withstand the sharp fangs of the stray dogs, and the pain cut so deep that it sent him screaming. Summing promptly stood up, and the cavalryman on night patrol caught up to the cavalryman in distress and kicked out at the stray dogs as they dragged him back. Summing noticed that the eyes of these dogs were oddly red with rage, so to be on the safe side, he told the cavalryman, "Shoot them to death with the bows. Something's wrong with these dogs." A few faint cries of a Chinese francolin reverberated through the night. As if sensing danger, the stray dogs turned tail and fled as the cavalrymen got on their horses and drew their bows. The dogs ran westward in a panic, and the cavalrymen followed in hot pursuit. A stray dog took an arrow to the leg and limped as it continued to flee onward. The cavalryman behind it drew his scimitar and leaned down with the intention to end the stray dog with one slash in between the sprinting of his horse. They galloped wildly, splashing froths of snow in the air. An explosive whoosh rang out, and a long arrow came hurtling from the west. The cavalryman instantly fell off his horse. His legs, however, were still hanging from the saddle, and he ended up getting dragged by the horse across the demarcation line. "Oh shit!" Summing swore to himself, feeling a sense of foreboding. Amur had long instructed them not to engage Qidong in battle at this moment. As long as they did not attack, Qi Juin could not step to the fore. He immediately reined in his horse and shouted, "Fall back!" But the torches ahead lit up all of a sudden, illuminating the surroundings brightly. Qi Juin. From where he was on horseback, Summing decried in the Dazhou tongue, "Women are devious." Qi Juin stood in front of the combat-ready garrison troops in full battle array. As she crushed the snow beneath her foot, she leisurely said, "Light up the beacon tower. Inform Kudu that the Qingshu tribe has breached the boundary line and invaded our territory." The Qidong garrison troops abruptly lined up their shields, and the cold steel of their blades glinted and flashed. Chapter 211. Heavy Frost. Chapter 211. Heavy frost. A boundless expanse of thick clouds swarmed forth and swallowed up the sunlight. Falcons from Libei soared across the vast horizon. Meng was the first to swoop down. Under the cries of the falcons, it spread its wings, dispersing the thin fog as it looked down upon the stretch of pure white snow. The Saker falcons came from the south like a volley of sharp arrows shooting straight towards the falcons. Letting out a long, loud cry, Meng spun and brushed past the military banner beneath. The sound of war drums instantly reverberated through the sinkhole. Cavalrymen surged towards them with the momentum of a tidal wave incoming from the south. The armored cavalry remained still. Once the scimitars of the Biancha cavalrymen could be clearly seen, Yin Chang drew his old blade with a loud clang and roared at the sky, "Unveil the trenches!" The Imperial army, who had been lying prostrate in the snowfield, promptly released their grip on the ropes at both ends, exposing the newly dug trenches. Meanwhile, the Biancha cavalry, renowned for their speed, was charging long distance towards them when they crossed the trenches. Unable to stop in time, the horses fell into the trenches, and cracking sounds instantly rang out as their front knees broke on impact. The vanguards of the Biancha cavalry tumbled into the trenches, throwing the array at the head into disorder. The Imperial army instantly drew their blades and pounced like wolves to engage this batch of vanguards in the trenches. Without losing speed, the Biancha cavalry at the back spurred their horses into leaping over the trenches to continue with their charge forward. Even as Yin Chang hacked down the Biancha cavalry, he still had to dodge the hooves leaping over his head, or he might just get his head kicked into a bloody pulp in a moment of inattention. He bent over and shouted over to the other end, "Lao Hu, what's wrong with you? You dug this way too narrow. Tantai, whose palms were slick with sweat. He heard Yin Chang's shouts as he fixed his eyes on the Biancha cavalry galloping over, but he did not dare to divert his attention to answer. Gripping his own twin blades, he silently recited Tantai Long's name to himself. A Biancha cavalryman's scimitar was already swinging towards him when the ponies were right about to reach him. Tantai, who rolled forward, and Xiao Qie, who was behind him, stuck out Longly blade in a flash, making use of the cavalryman's momentum to stab through him. Blood splattered. Leading the garrison troops, Tantai, who crouched and slashed his blade across to cut off the ponies' legs. The ponies screamed and threw back their heads as they toppled over to the ground, like wild geese that had lost their wings. The cavalryman fell off the ponies and rolled. Tantai, who wiped the blood from his face, lifted both blades and roared, "Revenge avenged!" After getting thwarted again and again, the Biancha cavalry decreased the momentum of their charge, no longer willing to advance rashly. But the distance between them had already shrunk. They wanted to retreat, but Xiao Qie was now advancing. Xiao Qie tapped gently on the abdomen of his horse with the back of his blade, and Lang Tao Shui Jin charged forth. The sound of the Libei armored cavalry's hooves was as resounding as muffled thunder as they pushed forth urgently with the snowstorm moving in tandem. They rammed into the Biancha cavalry, breaking the latter's battle array into tatters. The war chariot formation left the Biancha cavalry with no time to catch their breath. As long as they were slammed over to the ground by the heavy armors, the iron horseshoes of the Libei armored cavalry would trample over flesh and blood as they steamrolled over the Biancha cavalrymen's bodies. A Saker falcon swept past overhead, with the wind trailing in its path as it attempted to flee east. Meng swooped through the snow and grabbed hold of the Saker falcon with its talons. As it passed by Libei's wolf banner, it ripped off one of the Saker falcon's wings before flinging the Saker falcon away. The Biancha cavalry retreated like the receding tide, and one of its young generals galloped on horseback and yelled a series of swift commands. He withdrew the regular cavalry, then chided the scorpions in the Biancha tongue for them to advance. The scimitars were instantly drawn back as the cavalrymen retreated with their eyes on the Libei armored cavalry. Xiao Qie slowly returned to the battle formation, and the protruding columns on all sides followed suit and merged back swiftly. The scorpions took the place of the vanguards. The iron hammers they swung no longer faced up to one armored cavalry, but a group of armored cavalries. Xiao Qie led the charge. As he sped forth, he suddenly kept away Longly blade. Following his action, the armored cavalry behind him unleashed those new blades of terrifying length. Xiao Qie bent over slightly as they stabbed hard into the ranks of the scorpions like a flash of cold glint in the night. Xiao Qie flipped the longer hilt with both hands and took away a scorpion's head as his horse passed by. To reduce its weight, the sharp steel of the long blade was thinned down, and it took just the blink of an eye for throats to be slit. A spray of blood instantly spattered towards his heavy armor along its iron arm before spilling onto the ground. The iron hammers could not keep up with the speed of the long blades, and they were not long enough to swing and hit the armored cavalrymen themselves either. All they could do was watch helplessly as the Libei armored cavalry killed their way into their formation and cut down their own ranks into two halves. Lang Tao Shui Jin broke through the Biancha cavalry's encirclement and snorted as it turned around on its hooves. Xiao Qie held his long blade at a slanting angle and shook off the viscous blood on its blade. Scorpions on both sides gasped for air as they watched all of their center unit tumble off their horses. Everywhere Xiao Qie passed, streams of flowing blood formed. His long blade practically sliced off the heads of everyone who stood in his way. A scorpion pulled at his reins as he murmured in the Biancha tongue. Chidaki, the Libei armored cavalry spurred on their horses once more, and the scorpions, no longer willing to continue fighting, turned their horses around at the sound of that muffled thunder. When the young general of the Biancha cavalry at the back saw the scorpions retreating, he hurriedly brandished his blade to berate them, but to no avail. Fear had already been sown in the hearts of the scorpions. Following the loss of their leader, they had been reduced to mere sacrifices on this battlefield. Lang Tao Shui Jin galloped out of the pack, while the Libai armored cavalry followed close behind on its trail. The Biancha cavalry on the south side of the sinkhole were too powerless to resist, as their scimitars were unable to pierce the heavy armors. Those who lost their ponies scrambled over themselves to run like mad in the snow, their urgent breaths of white air resembling a wave of floodwater breaching its dam. Surfaces of snow quaked as the Libai armored cavalry made its passage through. A Biancha cavalryman who was falling behind the rest fell to the ground, and his scimitar went flying from his hand. Before he could even reach out a hand to draw out his pike dagger, he was swallowed up whole under the hooves of the armored cavalry. Xiao Qie charged out from the fringe of the battle formation and chased after the Biancha cavalry like Xiao Fengshu had done so 30 years ago, showing no mercy under the iron hooves of his horse. The Libai armored cavalry ran on a rampage as they assaulted and massacred their way forward. Heavy armors gravely traversed the battlefield, turning into heavy blades in the midst of emerging from their sheaths in Tantai whose eyes. As the scorpion galloped on his horse, he shouted sharply, "Chidaki! Vicious wolf!" 7 years ago, Xiao Jiming led the troops down south, earning himself the name River of Ice Armored Cavalry, and tonight, Xiao Qie chased after the Biancha cavalry for 20 li, the echoes reverberating through the lands he stepped on. Damn! Yin Chang's Adam's apple bobbed as he wiped the blood off his face and recited silently to himself, "The passage of heavy frost through the lands leaves not a blade of grass in its wake." Shun Zichuan was boiling tea in his tent. The prefectural lord, inept as he was in the art of tea, simply stuffed the tea leaves into the teapot, filled it with water, and set it on the fire to boil. His folding fan was resting on his knee, and there was a stack of piled-up documents on the desk at his side, yet his eyes were fixed on that tea as he watched it gradually start to boil and bubble over. Haragu squatted at the entrance of the tent and peeked through the gap. "It's not drinkable if you boil it like this, or is it?" he asked Fei Xing. Fei Xing did not have a favorable impression of this scorpion, so he looked ahead with his arms folded and listened to the urgent beats of the war drums. "It's not like you are going to be drinking it, so what are you worrying about?" Shen Zichuan stared blankly for a long time, and by the time he returned to his senses, the tea had almost evaporated. He lifted the teapot off, added more water, and continued to boil it. The sound of boiling water could cover up some of the drumming from the war drums, which was putting him in a dazed trance. He had not done any work today either. Seeing as it was late, Fei Xing lifted the flap to enter. He said softly to Shun Zichuan, "Master, how about taking a quick nap? As soon as there's news from the battlefront, I'll call you." Shun Zichuan lowered his eyes and did not answer him. Fei Xing understood that the prefectural lord was reluctant to do so, so he dared not persuade him further and retreated to the entrance of the tent to wait in attendance. The tea in the military tent boiled for the entire night. When it was almost dawn, Shun Zichuan heard the war drums stop. Shun Zichuan rose and pushed aside the flap. Fei Xing hurriedly draped a cloak over him and accompanied Shun Zichuan out of the tent. They made their way outside, where Shun Zichuan waited again for a moment in the snowy fog bathed in the first glimmer of dawn. It was extremely frigid in the morning, so frigid that the tip of one's nose would turn red from the freezing cold if one stood for too long out there. The north wind pounced on their faces like sharp knives. After a little less than an hour, Shun Zichuan suddenly heard the rising sound of hooves, followed by rows after rows of emerging silhouettes overlapping one another. Meng was the first to return to camp. Fei Xing heaved a sigh of relief, as if he had been relieved of a heavy load. He immediately congratulated Shun Zichuan, "Master, it's a success." Meng circled in the air, wanting to land on Shun Zichuan's arm. Shun Zichuan was not wearing his arm guard today. Just as he lifted his arm, a whistle sounded from the other end. Xiao Qie broke through the boundless expanse of heavy fog and spurred his horse on without stopping. The moment he rushed into the campgrounds, he swept up Shen Zichuan. Lang Tao Shui Jin slowed and turned its hooves around to gallop away into the fog again with both men on its back. Meng, which had pounced on empty air, landed on the military banner and wiped its talons clean as it watched them run further away into the distance with a sidelong glance. Yin Chang, with arms cradling his war trophy, wanted to say something, but Fei Xing held him back and did not give him the chance to open his mouth. The rest of them wore a wide array of expressions. Tantai, who spat on his palms and rubbed them together to warm them up a little. Let's enter the tent first. Military affairs can be reported a little later. There's no hurry to do so right now. With that, he repeated it once more, only to make what he had been trying to cover up all the more conspicuous. No hurry to do so now. Whatcha mean? No hurry? Yin Chang craned his neck to look around him and said in bafflement, "We have to head back to the city at the hour of Mao. His lordship's very much in a hurry." Chapter 212. Dredge up the past. Chapter 212. Dredge up the past. Lang Tao Shui Jin galloped away from the campgrounds, but did not go far. It came to a stop on a snowy slope at the northern end of the Chashire sinkhole. The humid fog and snow made Shen Zichuan appear to be situated amidst the vast expanse of misty, rolling waves on the lake's surface. All his eyes could see where they roamed was white. Xiao Qia rolled off his horse and removed his helmet. There was sweat along his temples as he panted slightly, yet his eyes were full of spirits. "Can you see Duanzhou?" As Shen Zichuan held on to Lang Tao Shui Jin's reins, he handed the blue handkerchief in his sleeve over to Xiao Qia. He could only catch a glimpse of the abandoned relay station's watchtower in the far distance amidst the visible clouds of his breath, but he understood Xiao Qia's jubilation. "Looking at Duanzhou now is just like looking into what's already in my bag." Xiao Qia lifted his chin slightly, and beads of sweat trickled down. He smiled. Shen Zichuan gazed at him, realizing that he still retained the unyielding and untamable attitude he possessed during their time in Kudu. This was the spirit that Shen Zichuan desired to have in his possession. Shen Zichuan leaned over, breathing onto Xiao Qia's cheek. The tip of his nose pressed right up against Xiao Qia and edged up along the latter's temple as he licked the latter's sweat like he desired. Those beads of astringent, salty sweat dissolved in Shen Zichuan's mouth. As his Adam's apple bobbed slightly, he said, "This will be your, Xiao Suan's, riding track from now on." Xiao Qia raised a hand over Shen Zichuan's nape, covering it, and the iron fingers of the armor he had yet to remove were icy and hard as they lay over the soft, fair neck, leaving behind a touch that resembled the cold steel of a blade. "I don't want a riding track." The straight bridge of Xiao Qia's nose nuzzled along the spot on Shen Zichuan that had been bobbing earlier. He watched fixedly as Shen Zichuan narrowed his expressive eyes. His words had an edge of danger to it as he said, "I want Shen Lanzhao." Shen Zichuan breathed out a puff of hot air at Xiao Qia. Xiao Qia thought Shen Zichuan wanted to kiss him. He did not expect Lanzhao to grab the chance to pull back the blue handkerchief in his hand. Shen Zichuan then straightened up and wrapped the overcoat tightly around himself. The prefectural lord, who was sensitive to the cold, revealed only his eyes and the reddened tips of his ears as he said in a muffled voice, "Shen Lanzhao's freezing to death." Xiao Qia, his arms empty, had still yet to realize what just happened. Shen Zichuan watched Xiao Qia's expression undergo several changes. Xiao Qia looked as though he was going to make a grab for him, so Shen Zichuan immediately shook the reins to urge Lang Tao Shui Jin into returning back to camp. Xiao Qia cradled his helmet in his arms. There was still a lingering warmth from where he had been licked on his temple. He touched it, gradually getting riled up as though he were a maiden of a decent family who had been disrespected by a frivolous philanderer. Shen Lanzhao, Xiao Qia watched as Shen Zichuan fled. With a stride of his long legs, he slid down the snowy slope and yelled, "Heartless cad!" Achi, who had been confident of success, had been defeated at the Chashire sinkhole, and the Bianxia people, who had been winning battles in the north for half a year, never expected Achi to lose to Shao Qian. The remaining soldiers in Duanzhou were no match for Wu Ziyu's surprise attack. Consequently, the 6 prefectures of Zhongbua all fell under Shen Zichuan's command. Kudu received news of it only 7 days later. At the same time, the military report of Qi Zhuin's mobilization of troops into battle with the Qingshu tribe also made its way into the palace. The Empress Dowager sat in Mingli Hall behind the hanging curtain and flung the memorial onto the seat across the luminous pearls. The eastern pearls swayed beside her ears as she held back her rage and barked at the ministers in the hall. Did the Ministry of War reject Qidong's request to deploy its troops or not? Chenzhen, you handle military affairs, and you can't even make yourself clear? The Minister of War, Chenzhen, immediately kneeled on the ground, knowing that the Empress Dowager was venting her anger. Qi Zhuin now had a strong and well-trained military, and Kudu was unwilling to act rashly and offend them, so they could only take it out on the easy games like him. He listened expressionlessly until she was done speaking before saying, "In the first month of the year, Commander-in-Chief Qi presented a memorial to the imperial court, hoping to deploy troops to fight the Qingshu tribe. We rejected her request on the grounds that we were lacking in military provisions. The Grand Secretariat kept a copy of the correspondences for archival record. The Senior Grand Secretary and the various other ministers are all aware of it." The Empress Dowager understood that this was in no way authorized by the Ministry of War, but she was still fuming. After a moment's pause, she continued, "So why did she go ahead with it this time? 7 days ago, the Bianjuan Commandery's night patrol encountered a surprise attack by the Qingshu tribe." Chen Zhen lifted his head slightly at this point. Commander-in-Chief Qi was thus forced to mobilize troops. Amur is at war with Li Bei in the north. Why would the Qingshu tribe provoke Qidong for no rhyme or reason? Han Cheng had been at the receiving end of Qi Zhuin's frostiness when he escorted Hua Xiangyi to her new home. Sitting in the hall now, he suddenly bared a smile and said, "Then again, it's really such a coincidence that Commander-in-Chief Qi happened to be in the Bianjuan Commandery just when the Qingshu tribe launched their surprise attack. This battle was such a swift and abrupt one that the report of victory and request were both presented together. Even if she was at fault, she had already succeeded." Kong Qiu, who had fallen ill after the New Year, sat in the hall with his complexion all ashen as he covered his mouth and coughed. We cannot listen to only one side of the story. If the Qingshu tribe had genuinely crossed the line, then Commander-in-Chief Qi's mobilization of troops was an act of emergency. For the past years, the situation at the frontiers has been unstable. When Lu Guangbai was still stationed at the Bianjuan Commandery, the Qingshu tribe often invaded as well. The details of the matter still need to be presented by Commander-in-Chief Qi. What is of utmost urgency now is how long this war will continue. We are right about to enter the plowing season in spring, and the 13 cities of Jueshi are still waiting for the arrangements to be made. The supply of military provisions is of major concern. Pan Xiangjie timidly folded his arms up his sleeves. Xue Xiuzhua wanted to investigate their Pan clan of Danqing, and this matter had been stuck at an impasse for a long time. Given that the fields were still in dispute, he did not dare to butt in now for fear that the Grand Secretariat would apportion the shortfall of military provision to them. The Empress Dowager did not consent to send their troops to war because Qidong's deployment of troops at this moment was akin to supporting Li Bei, and also because Xue Xiuzhua had been too impatient in chasing the accounts. The 8 great clans were presently in a situation where one slight move could lead to major consequences for all of them. Fields were their roots, and the young masters of the 8 cities all depended on these fields to survive. If an investigation were to be launched, then the noble clans would suffer debilitating effects just by having to return the fields to the common folks and make up for the arrears in taxes. Not to mention that there was also the risk of dismissal and prosecution as well as imprisonment. Qi Juin's battle with the Qingshu tribe meant that the expenses for the Qidong's 5 commanderies' military salaries and provisions would have to go through the accounts of the Ministry of Revenue. Once the state treasury ran out of money, all the past events during the reign of Yongyi were going to get dredged up again. The Empress Dowager was acting in place of the Crown Prince, and there was still the heir apparent beside her eyeing the throne, so she dared not act rashly without careful consideration. Whether Amur was a rapacious aggressor or not, the noble clans did not know, but they knew it was inadvisable to keep delaying given the current situation. Zhonghua had already grown to be a thorn in their sides, and getting themselves stuck in a stalemate with the heir apparent and the Grand Secretariat would not do the noble clans any good. Since it was the Qingshu tribe that invaded, Qi Juin can just repel them. There is no need to mobilize troops again to penetrate deeper into the enemy's territory. The Empress Dowager's fury had subsided. She deliberated it over and said, "I know that it's bitterly cold and impoverished at the frontiers. No doubt the battle with the Biantia people must be fought, but not now. Just as the Grand Secretary has said, the spring plough season is right around the corner. We should place the commoners as our priority. Not all of Jueshi's territories last year had bumper harvests either, and the granaries in Kudu have still yet to be filled to the brim, so where would the imperial court have the spare grains to give Qidong to fight wars? This matter has to be conveyed properly to Qi Juin. As someone who assists in the government affairs of the 5 commanderies, she should have long known about this." Silence descended upon Mingli Hall for a moment. The hanging screens at the entrance were all securely tucked in to keep the wind out. Because of Qi Juin's mobilization of troops, the atmosphere in the hall was grave and heavy. In truth, Kong Qiu and Sun Yu approved of Qi Juin's wish to wage a battle against the Qingshu tribe, but they were presently duking it out with the noble clans. Pan Lin was the one who had the Ministry of Revenue in his grasp, but he presently had his hands too full with Xue Xiuzhua incriminating him to jointly discuss the matter of Qidong's military salaries and provisions. Moreover, it was precisely because the Pan clan was the first to bear the brunt that Pan Xiangjie did not dare to let his son get too involved with the Grand Secretariat at this juncture. Pan Xiangjie was used to playing fence-sitter. It was all thanks to this ability to sway where the wind blows that he could survive until now. He did not want to offend Xue Xiuzhua, and he did not want to offend the Empress Dowager either. As long as there was no victor in the tussle for power in Kudu, he was unwilling to let the Pan clan follow another's lead easily. In the past, he threw in his lot with Hua Xiqian and Wei Huaigu, but these 2 men both used him as a scapegoat. Now wary and guarded, he trusted none of these 3 parties. Sun Yu sighed lightly. He rarely spoke up in Mingli Hall now. Yu Xiaozai left the capital with the letter he wrote to Shun Zichuan, but Shun Zichuan never replied, and he understood what Shun Zichuan meant by that. Everyone had drinks in his house a year ago, and he still remembered the distinguished figures Shun Zichuan and Xiao Qie had cut then. He found it a pity the way things had turned out. Sun Yu shifted his gaze to Li Jianting, who was sitting upright at the side staring at the tea before her, as if she had not heard the discussion in the hall. After the court session was dismissed, Sun Yu and Kong Qiu walked along the long path that had been cleared of snow. The palace eaves on both sides hung low, turning the paths oppressively dim. The eunuch in front was holding a lantern. As Sun Yu walked, his sleeves flapped in the wind. The wind blew his short, newly grown beard all over, and he lifted a hand to stroke it. "Why didn't you say a word today with something this big happening?" Kong Qiu asked. Sun Yu lifted his eyes. "Her Majesty's mind is already made up. The result will be the same, whether or not I speak up." It was already dark by the time both men walked out of the palace gate. Sun Yu did not get into the horse carriage. Instead, he carried the lantern himself and stepped on the snow as he walked on the level path with Kong Qiu. "Xuani, you seem to have a lot on your mind today." Kong Qiu scrutinized him. "What are you thinking about?" "Thinking about today last year," Sun Yu answered, when Vice Commander Shun and Marquis Shao were both still in Kudu. If Emperor Tianqian had not been assassinated, perhaps Shun Zichuan and Shao Qie would still be in Kudu today. Sun Yu had always been one to cherish talents. He once thought of having Shun Zichuan join the imperial court as an official, but alas, things did not go the way he wished. The weight of Shun Zichuan's crime was too heavy. Kong Qiu let out a long sigh and thought of Hai Liangyi again. If Emperor Tianqian possessed even a fraction of a crown prince's disposition, would you and I be reduced to such a state? I've been feeling more and more out of my depth lately. There are simply too many situations that are beyond my ability to salvage. They do not consent to the current war Commander-in-Chief Qi is waging with the Qingshu tribe for fear that the military provisions would drag the 8 cities' fields into it. But I can tell that the war in Libei is at a tense and critical juncture. Even the Prince of Libei, Xiao Fangxiu, met his end in battle. The strength and the capabilities of the Bianxia can no longer be underestimated. Sun Yu could see it all clearly, but it was pointless. He could not solve the conflict in Kudu just with his eloquence alone. It was simply a tall order to get the noble clans to relinquish their existing interests. Both of them had not gone far when they saw a man standing under a bamboo umbrella ahead of them, waiting. Sun Yu and Kong Qiu traded looks and looked at Shuexiuzhua. Shuexiuzhua's official robe was brand new, and he was not wearing a line jacket. He stood in that spot all by his lonesome self, like a floating leaf among the torrential currents even as the wind sent his sleeves fluttering. He kept away his umbrella and bowed in greetings to Sun Yu and Kong Qiu. "Why are you standing here? Is something the matter?" Kong Qiu asked. Shuexiuzhua straightened up as floating snow sporadically danced past. "This humble official has been waiting here for both gentlemen to discuss the issue of Danqing's fields and taxes in detail." Sun Yu frowned slightly and said, "Affairs of the imperial court should be settled on the imperial court itself. There is no reason to discuss them in private. This case, in particular, should avoid having aspersions cast on it. If others were to see this, rumors and slanders would inevitably start making their rounds. You should go back first. We'll discuss it in the Grand Secretariat's office tomorrow morning after the morning court session. If not for the urgency of the matter, this humble official would naturally not dare to bother both of you." Shuexiuzhua's expression remained unchanged. At the beginning of the month, Her Majesty drew up a decree to have a key official from the Ministry of Revenue tag along to investigate the case, and Pan Lin appointed Liang Tsuishan, who is in charge of salt taxes in Hezhou and Jueshi. Kong Qiu and Sun Yu both knew who Liang Tsuishan was. Shao Qie had vouched for him and recommended him for an official position during the collapse of the public ditches. He was a Ministry of Revenue official who had been personally appointed by Emperor Tianqian to investigate Wei Huaigu in the case of the military provisions. He was very talented in the administration of financial affairs and taxes. Last year, he sorted out the old accounts of the 13 cities with Jiang Qinshan in Jueshi, and for a period of time, he even managed the transportation of grains by water from Hezhou to the capital. Yan Heru told Shun Zichuan that it was tough to do business via the waterways. The Yan clan's goods heading for Jueshi were all subjected to rigorous checks, and Liang Tsuishan was the reason for this. This man was smooth and diplomatic in his work, but he was not a slippery character. In his position, the amount of tax money passing through his hand every day numbered tens of thousands of silver. Yan Heru wanted to pull strings and make backdoor deals with him, but his attempts were all rebuffed. Liang Tsuishan has already returned to the capital and will enter the palace tomorrow morning to seek an audience. Shuexiuzhou held his umbrella in his arms. But he had a narrow escape this trip and must meet both gentlemen tonight. Liang Kunshan was not wearing an official robe, and a jersey was worn with an old sheepskin mule, and he was paired with green shoes. He is the exact opposite of the Chongshan master in the rumors of the market, with a short beard and a square face, because his skin is tanned because he travels all day. It doesn't look like holding a pen in both hands, it's like holding a hoe. When he stood under the post lantern to meet Kong Yen and Sun Yu nearly regarded him as a miscellaneous servant. Liang Kunshan was not wearing an official robe, and a jersey was worn with an old sheepskin mule, and he was paired with green shoes. He is the exact opposite of the Chongshan master in the rumors of the market, with a short beard and a square face, because his skin is tanned because he travels all day. It doesn't look like holding a pen in both hands, it's like holding a hoe. When he stood under the post lantern to meet Kong Yen and Sun Yu nearly regarded him as a miscellaneous servant. How does Chongshan look like this? Sun Yu exclaimed. Liang Yenshan led them upstairs and waited until they were seated. Then he said, "It's a long story, the two adults are willing to come, and the officials are really dead without regrets. Save me in the water and fire, this favor, Xiaoguan, is memorable." Xue Xiuzhuo wiped his hands with the hot pad in the room, and sat beside him, saying, "It's urgent, please talk to the two teachers in detail." "What's the matter?" Kong Yen looked at Liang Yenshan. "It's a day, you should only arrive at the capital later. The back is pressed tightly and I dare not delay on the way to Xiaoguan." "Don't hide, my lord, this dress is also to hide people's eyes," Liang Yishan said, taking the account book out of his arms, and rested gently on Sun Yu's hand. "Check it out, you've seen it, you save one province." Sun Yu opened the ledger, looked at it for a long time and hesitated. "Isn't this the ledger that Luanqing presented to the household at the beginning of the year?" "Yes, it is the book of Helian Hu of Wuqing City. At the beginning of the year, it was handed over to the other 7 cities to the Ministry of Households for review. The inspectors next to the Metropolitan Institute of Auditors had to clarify the details of their taxes and expenses. There was no problem at that time." Having said this, Liang Minshan took another ledger out of his arms. This was reorganized by Xiaoguan in recent days. When Sun Yu looked at the beginning, he changed his face and asked Liang Yunshan, "How did you figure out this book?" Liang Yenshan looked dignified, and sorted out his thoughts a little, saying, "The Queen Mother planned for the month before, and Pan Shirlang wanted to go to the palace next to the Dali Temple to check the accounts of Chotan City. The salt tax is in Yongqing." Within a few days, Liang Maoshan received a post from Jushi Duliang Road in the station. He did not see him when he was on business. However, the Duliang Road took the opportunity to leave a thin gift for Liang Maoshan. It's gold. Jueshi is accessible to Tanqing and Hezhou waterways, and the superintendent of Grain Road is in charge of food and transportation. It is a fat pour, but because the junior officials are in the Jueshi chief secretary, there is the chief minister Jiang Qingqing, so I dare not fight against the grass. The position of Governor Liang Dao is similar to the position of Liang Yishan, except that he does not have the power of both places, but it has a considerable influence on Jueshi. Liang Xieshan did not dare to attack the grass because he suspected that the man had been offered by Zhang's Qingshan to pay bribes. Liang Yishan is very cautious. It is not easy for him to make it out, so he is very careful in walking officialdom. He wanted to be a noble minister, but also to ensure his life. Jueshi was the site of Jiangshan's Qingshan. If he immediately played the impeachment of the governor, he would be detained if he could not get out of Jueshi. In addition, Shan Xianda opened the warehouse for 4 years, and he was shocked by the fact that he was responsible. He was well loved in the 13 cities of Jueshi. Based on this, Liang Yushan had no chance of winning against him, let alone a person with a good eye. Everyone knows that Jiang Qingshan is Xue Xiuzhuo's knife. Xiaoguan turned around in the post, and naturally the gold could not be collected, but he hurried back and worried about burying the calamity. Liang Minshan said here and glanced at Xue Xiuzhuo. The mission was not short and he knew a little about him. Therefore, the lower officials simply summoned the governor to the front. This is a risky move. Liang Xieshan, who was afraid to move, had to find other traces from this breakthrough. At least he had to figure out whether the person standing behind Duliang Road was a river. The superintendent of grain road transports taxes through the 13 cities. It is not difficult to get money, Kong said, but the royal history set up by the Dudu People's Procuratorate is also keeping accounts, and the ship's origins are clear. How can he hide the sky and cross the sea? Xiaoguan's doubts are here, Liang said. Xiaoguan didn't dare to pretend. He had to supervise Liang Dao to bring the gold back, and he told me that the gold went very clean, not on Jushi's account. He manages luck, since it's not something on Jushi's book. Sin Healing put on his account book, that's Tanqing or Hezhou. Yen Heru of Hezhou is a thief with a thief. He inspected Hezhou Yunyun last year. He had paid bribes, but he has a lot of money, so he doesn't have to take the risk to draw money from the internal account of the court. When it comes to Tanqing, he is even more careful. The current state capital of Tanqing is Fei's Partial House, which is a family of extravagant flowers. It is very Queen's eye-catching. In recent years, the achievements of the government have been excellent. Climbing and biting others can only deal with that governor's road, hoping for more details. Bribery is about doing things, especially sitting in Liang Yishan's position. He originally thought that Duliangdo was from Jiangshan's Qingshan. He came to pay the bribe for the Jueshi salt tax that they checked at that time, but he soon realized that it was not. Since this gold was not on Jueshi's account, that means that there is another person behind Du Liangdao. This person can only be a member of the family who is close to Wuqing. Liang Yenshan will never say the city of Huaqing, because that is the Queen Mother's family. At the time, Hua Xiqian fell, and the court that was copied by the court was only the house of Hua Xiqian. After a year, the queen was resurrected. Now it is the main government affairs. Liangshan was brave enough to dare not bite the Queen Mother. But Liang Qiaoshan can understand what this gold is for as long as he thinks about it. At that time, the Empress Dowager planned to inspect Liangqing Mountain with the Dali Temple. Who was most worried about this? Danqing Pan's most panic. Xin Yu has understood here, and in such a large circle, in fact, in order to preserve Pan's family, He Lianhou used the hand of supervising Liang Dao to bribe Liang Yishan. He Lianhou's daughter Zhao Yuejun was married to Pan's son, and his partial housewife pointed to the flower girl, only he was the most suitable, but this move did not go well. Pan Yen had a promotion of Liang Yenshan. This kind of kindness was originally conferred by Xiaoqia, but later it really was because Liang Yenshan had the ability to endure. Pan Yenkan made him come forward. Liang Yishan was a little selfish, and for this affection, he had to think twice about dancing, which was something he couldn't refuse. But now, He Lianhou sent someone to pay a bribe. As long as Liang Yishan didn't report the matter, even if he paid back Pan Yan's kindness, as for Dan Cheng's account check later, he was no longer burdened. Not only that, along with this bribe, Liang Yenshan secretly re-examined the 8 city books, and repeatedly checked the account books of Fei's in Helianhou City. The so-called money that cannot be found on the books is actually that when the ships or caravans pass the domestic checkpoints, the family will set up invisible checkpoints in their own city. In order to transit, businessmen can only pay private taxes to the family at double the price. Later, a person like Yen Heru appeared and wanted to return the silver he had taken out, so he took over the position of the clan, and began to sell copper and iron salts in the territory for the family and these local officials, bypassing the tariffs. Dunzhou as Xiaohu City was established. Xin Yu reopened the books led by Liang Yishan and looked at the dizziness of those silver quotas. In recent years, they have been entangled with the family in Lidu. In order to check the accounts, how many capable officials have been discounted? The 2 books of Hua Xiqian and Pan Rugi, recovered by Hai Liangyi in Xianda years, are just the tip of the iceberg. Although Yongyi ZTE is short-lived, the taxation system left to all regions is the largest part of the annual revenue of the treasury. Dezhou was able to succumb to this quickly in just a dozen years. The whole department was on bad debts, and the interior was hollowed out. All of this silver flowed into the pockets of the family. Sinyu wasn't sitting securely, and he was shaking as he held his ledger. In addition to taxation and farmland, Sinyu didn't even have to calculate carefully. He could already imagine how big the outflow was. Xian Danayan left the army and did not have a military battalion. Xiao Jiming had to rely on the food from the North Army Tun to run south to fight against the Bianxia cavalry. Sinyu breathed quickly, shaking his hand and turning the page. At that time Qidong there was no military battalion. Lu Guangbai took Qi Zhuin's dowry to the north to rescue him. Qi Xiu lost all the land property to the garrison in these years. In the first year of Tianqin, the Green Mouse Department hit the frontier of the county. Yellow sand. Every time. Both the north and the south were brought in for money, and Qi Zhuin was forced to mingle with the hooligans who put tiger skin money in Lu. Lu Guangbai could not even see Emperor Xianda in Xiandanyan. How many people died during the drought in Jushi? Shan gritted his teeth to open the warehouse to put in grain, and his 80-year-old mother had to weave the debt. In the 6 states of Zhongbua, helplessness and emptiness, Zhou Gui, Luo Mu, Huaqing and others were forced to lie low in front of the bandits. This is the poor who cried. Sinyu hated between his teeth and threw the ledger on the desk case, saying, "The private fields that the 8 cities have encroached on have not been counted in, this is all blood and silver." He said here, choked with a mute voice, "Gu Lao chase to that point. Xian Danayan will die. Can this still be saved? This can't be saved." The room went silent. Liang Yenshan said nothing. He was a rootless and bottomless duckweed. If he wanted to go deeper, he had to rely on a big tree. He first ventilated with Jiang Qingshan to get Shuexiu's interview, and then saw Kong Yen and Sinyu. He did not accept the gold of Helian Ho, but it was useless to just keep it in his hands. Someone had to guarantee it, otherwise he would die in dancing as long as he did not make false accounts in accordance with Helian Ho's intentions. Can't protect him. Shuexiu's scarf was cold. He said, "I should have avoided this, but it was a matter of deep security, and it involved dancing field investigation. So I could only discuss with the 2 teachers here." Sinyu and Kong Jing each poured cups of tea. Today, when we heard about Qidong's use of soldiers, the Ministry of Households must shirk again. Bad debts everywhere are mixed up. I'm afraid that it will delay spring plowing and Qidong's military food. Kong Shi was very frightened of Shuexiu. Shuexiu was too thrilling in the matter of Chujun, and relied on Tai Shuestorm to squeeze the officials in the cold. Now the hard-working faction is in full swing, and Kong Shi is not in the taste. Relying on his instinct of serving in the Ministry of Criminal Affairs for many years, he determined that Shuexiu would never be helpless and said, "You must call me here, presumably not just to look at the account book. One discussion is complete, one is complete." Shuexiu changed his name to Kongzhi. Yuan Fu did not question the commander's use of soldiers and mice in the discussions at Mingli Hall. It was agreed, but because the state treasury was empty, the Ministry of Household Affairs did. It is difficult to bear military expenses, so I have not discussed it with my Queen Mother. Yes, Kong Yen was more stable than Hailiangyi at the time. At this moment, the commander is using the soldier and mouse department to seem to dissolve the North's troubles, but it is to clear the Dajo's troubles. A more wolf's ambition, no cover under the nest after finishing the egg. Helping the North now is helping Dazhou. Shuexiu took a note from his sleeve and pushed it to Kong Yen, saying, "This is the Qidong Army's expenditure I just roughed out. It is not cheaper to use long-range troops than in previous years in Bianjuan County. The consumption of grain vehicles can eat up last year's white horse, statewide tax and silver." Kong Jing looked at the discount and said, "Last year, we used some of our money, and now it is near the beginning of spring. Whether the 8 cities can be successfully implemented is also a big problem. The family refuses to return the farmland and pay the field tax, and there is no way for the cabinet. It would be useless to approve the command of the marshal to send troops. I have a way, Shuexiuzhua looked at Kong Yen. This time Qidong army can be borne by Shui. As soon as this remark came out, not only Kong Jing and Sun Yu, but even Liang Yishan were stunned. As we all know, Xueqing of Quanqing showed weakness in the previous generation. His sister-in-law Shuexiui was a fake and high, and he was coaxed by gangsters to owe money. His family has only one Shuexiuzhua who can still stand in the chapel. Shui, where is the money? There was a sudden flash of light in Liang Bishan's mind, thinking of Shinzichuan, and then thinking of Yun Hongxian. Confounded, Shui Jing looked at Shuexiuzhua and said, I am just giving you the IOU as the first assistant of the cabinet, and I may not be able to pay it back. This money Yuan Fu doesn't have to give me an IOU. Shuexiuzhua poured a cup of tea for Kong Jing, and said in full color, I only ask Yuan Fu to work with me to check the Yichengshan tax. The lanterns outside the station shook, and the wind swept notices on the walkway. The sound of Xing Lu on Donglong Street in Badu faintly passed through the station's long road, blocked by the palace wall, and disappeared between the heavy eaves. Inside the palace wall, Li Jianting sat on the couch, thinking of Qian Chen in the sound of the iron horse tapping. Feng Quan was hanging down for Li Jianting, and suddenly he heard Chu Jun ask, Are you wearing an earring? Li Jianting soaked his shoulders and arms in wufa. She looked at the deep dormitory, as if to answer for Feng Quan, and as if to answer for herself. I hate earrings. She turned to Feng Quan with the eyes of Emperor Guangqing, smiling slowly in the dim, wearing like a domestic animal, letting people slaughter. The author has something to say. Thank you for watching. 2K Novel Reading Network. The sun was shining brightly on the day, and the gate of Duanzhou City was chaotic. The snow on the ground was wet and splashed with horseshoes. The heavy-duty cart slipped between the slabs, dragging the horse crooked and hissing, blocking the road, and the north rail behind couldn't ride in, so he had to dismount to come and join hands. The sun was shining brightly on the day, and the gate of Duanzhou City was chaotic. The snow on the ground was wet and splashed with horseshoes. The heavy-duty cart slipped between the slabs, dragging the horse crooked and hissing, blocking the road, and the north rail behind couldn't ride in, so he had to dismount to come and join hands. This bird weather, Yin Chang was anxious, twisted his pants belt, and blushed. When it changes, it will change. I also froze to death a few days ago, and I've got lousies hot today. Horses ran along the road, and the wet snow splashed all over. Fei Xing wore his robe, put it in his belt, raised his hand and twisted his nose and complained, Why are these sand horses so stinky? They are all running on the gobi. If you want to pull them, said the Taihu tiger, and the front side pony raised his tail to pull the dung, and the dung fell into the tide snow, steaming. Huantai tiger shaved his army boots and tried to pull this horse farther. Before he even started, he flew over several people and splashed hot feces on them. Fei Xing's complexion was blue, and he smelled like a jumper. When he saw the fresh feces attacking, he hid behind Yin Chang, so that the old man blocked it completely. Run! Yin Changchong yelled away from the north rail rider, wiped his face again, and said to Fei Xing, Hide yourself. My sister-in-law Yulima, turn around and go back here, and Hu Taitai waved his hand and cursed, Your mother, get off. My sister-in-law Yu Xin changed her boots and saw that they were all dirty. They refused to go down, slowed down the horse, came to the front and said, Why are you two? Elder and the governor? Go ahead. Fei Xing couldn't breathe and squeezed his throat. Why didn't this snow get packed up early? It's all blocked up now, you see what it looks like. My master's blue and white robe came down to the ground scourge. Xuanzi Yu won the battle, and was so proud of the spring breeze that he was thinking about asking them to drink a few days when he was free. He was scolded and was not annoyed and said proudly, I'm busy. Before he laughed on this side, the snowball on the other side hit his face. Gujin couldn't stand his nose. His complexion turned blue, and he scolded the sister-in-law for the remaining ball. You laughed. The sky was so hot, the snow in the city followed, and you waited for this bad official ditch in Duanzhou. By that time, there will be all stinks inside and outside the city. Gu Jin is usually taciturn, because he bears the responsibility of raising Ding Tao, so he rarely swears. He was not stigmatized by Guowei's humiliation at Tudalong Banner last year. Sun Ziyu used to be quite attentive in the past. This time, she was stunned by the victory, and exposed in trivial matters. If Chen Yang was still here, he would definitely remind him, but now he changed to Gujin, and it was more straightforward to scold him. The three people still standing behind were dumbfounded. Yin Chang was holding a row of Yuan and Hetaihu standing in a row, waiting for Gujin to order immediately to start working. Fei Xing whispered, "This is familiar." Huantai Tiger said vaguely, Well, Yin Chang Mao said, "I didn't teach it." Xuanzi Yu has rolled off his horse honestly. Duanzhou has never encountered a fire like Dunzhou, and the street appearance is still the same as it was 7 years ago. The shop restaurant has been closed for a long time. Achi has only kept a few cooked meat shop. Scorpions love to eat stewed beef here. Biancha's heavy soldiers lived here for a period of time, emptying all the civilian areas on the east and west sides, but retaining the ghost town area north. Lei Jingjing is here to trade with scorpions. Shen Zichuan stepped on the old debris pile, jumped onto the collapsed courtyard wall, and stood on top of it to see the districts on the north side. This place was used to be bought by Master. Something you can't see on the market. What's south? Xiao Qia stepped up, looking south. Biancha's horse farm. Shen Zichuan exhaled and said, "This is an empty city." Shen Zichuan was in the 2 states of Ci and Cha last year. He once worried that there were too many refugees from Danqing, but now it seems that the declining population of Zhongbua is a good place to carry the refugees from 8 cities. It's time to revisit the Yellow Book. Xiao Qia watched as he soared in the sky and was lazily tanned. He was wearing no armor today, only wearing an arm restraint. Last year was mainly controlled by the 3 states. The Chazhou and Dunzhou garrisons were scarce. Naturalization was co-organized by the officials. But now the 6 states are under the control of the civilians and the military. Separated. Civil registration is under the control of the Ministry of Households, and military registration cannot be unified. Xiao Qia served as the governor of the embargo in Badu, and the embargoed compound had a place to handle the embargo. This is one of the reasons for the incompatibility between the embargo and the 8 major battalions. The Chinese masters are not so easy to do. The staff of Zizhou is not enough. All 6 states need government affairs and military command divisions, as well as relative inspectors. These things are not difficult, and Yu Xiao will be able to inspect the 6 state affairs. This is equivalent to an inspection. I want him to be a Zongbadai. He has been excellent in the evaluation in Badu. He knows the tricks of the local yamen. Although Qing Feng refuses to follow me, he is willing to help the rest of the 5 states' government affairs, which can be regarded as solving my urgent need. Shen Zichuan looked back and flew back, talking in his mouth. There is no shortage of public officials. As long as the public officials of various states are willing to open their doors, people will come naturally. Lack is an important member who can govern the affairs of the state. Not only that, Shen Zichuan still lacks generals. At present, Luo Mu is temporarily in charge of military affairs in Chazhou. It will only be a moment. Shen Zichuan will not let him stay for so long, because Luo Mu is now under the jurisdiction of 3 powers, and Jin Wei is temporarily replaced by Jin Wei. Intervening in the power of Chazhou government affairs, if Luo Mu moved other thoughts, as long as he did concealment, he might be able to hide Shen Zichuan's eyes. In order to avoid this situation from happening again, Shen Zichuan must determine the candidates for each state as soon as possible. suddenly fell on Xiao Qia's arm. Xiao Qia said, "The money treasurer is also lacking." When Xiao Qia mentioned this, Shun Zichuan thought of Liang Yishan. He looked at Xiao Qia and said, "It's a pity Liang Qiaoshan. Liang Yeshan followed Pan Yu to do something, and it is not a waste." Xiao Qia gave Mammoth flat feathers. "I heard the report a few days ago. Shui Xiuzhua wants to check the land of Danqing? If this can really be done, no city was spared, and that would be a great hit for the family." "It's not clear yet," Shen Zichuan said, jumping off the wall. "The details won't be known until everyone comes over." The two of them walked back along the road. When they reached the house where they had settled, they didn't see a few bones. Only Fei Xing was here. "It's all going to Qingxue," Fei Xing said in his mouth and then said, "At this moment, Gujin and Xuanzi are on top." What this meant was that he was not lazy and happened to be resting. Knowing Fei Xing's temperament, Shen Zichuan did not intend to pursue it. He only told Xiao Qia, "The Guangzhou and Duanzhou should be re-examined. I don't know what it is, so we should plan it earlier." Xiao Qia glanced at Fei Xing but said nothing. Fei Xing did a good job in Huo Lingyun's affairs. He pressed his temper without hitting the other side, did not look at his eyes and did not find Huo Lingyun's trouble, so Xiao Qia finally remembered him. Fei Xing didn't dare to let the two of them stick at the door, leading the way, and let the prince sit down first. "This place is the house of the original commander of Duanzhou City, that is, the Zhu family from Lei Jingzhang, who was left here and abandoned, and was picked up by Xuanzi Yu to take the wind and settle down for both of them." When Xueqing at the gate of the city arrived, they were all soldiers leading the battle, and Shen Zichuan never let them come all night. The kitchen prepares the food early, and everyone rests as they please. Fei Xing lived in a house with Yin Chang and Huantai Hu. When the two took off their boots, Fei Xing fell to the ground on the spot. Shen Zichuan and Xiao Qia finished their meals, and Gujin waiting outside came in. Xiao Qia saw that Gujin's look was not right, so he put aside his idle book and asked, "What is it?" Gujin took the letter from his arms and presented it to Xiao Qia, saying, "Li Bei has sent a letter to the master." Xiao Qia read the letter in two letters. One was an official letter written by Xiao Jiming, and the other was a private letter from Chen Yang. He first read Xiao Jiming's letter. His elder brother mentioned that horses can go to Luoshan at the end of February, and he also mentioned that Xiao Qia would return to the battlefield at the end of February. These are things that Xiao Qia had known for a long time. One is interesting. After Gujin went out, Shen Zichuan rose from the back, pressed Xiao Qia's hair, looked at the letter and said calmly, "Big brother's surprise." Xiao Qia looked at the article several times and said, "Big brother transferred Guo Weili to my 2nd battalion. This is to make the 3rd battalion free for the master. Guo Weili is not used to Hassan's rhythm, and staying at the 3rd battalion is also a grieve. In all fairness, Guo Weili does have the talent to lead troops. He can keep 2 Dalong's banner for so long. But this person is fierce, rushing, and difficult to get along with, especially when he is not convinced. Gunpowder smell. Last year, he injured Gujin, and also lost Gujin's military rank. Therefore, he had a delicate relationship with Xiao Qia. After Xiao Qia laid the 3rd battalion in Shasha, the band army and Guo Weili's soldiers repeatedly rubbed in the 3rd battalion. The leaders of the 3 major battle camps in the battlefield will rotate this year, and Xiao Qia and Guo Weili are not used to each other's soldiers. Guo Weili has basically not used the embargo to the 2nd battalion. He feels that the embargo is both oily and bad. Because of Xiao Fengshu's incident, he now can't get used to Xiao Qia and hasn't broken his face anymore, but Gu Jin's incident hasn't passed at all. This is a thorn that runs across the two sides. This person is not easy to use. Xiao Jiming's arrangement is also very meaningful. The other 2 major camps can communicate with Guo Weili. Whether it is Zuoqianqiu, Lu Guangbai or Jiaowei, they will not have disputes with Guo Weili, but Xiao Jiming chose to transfer him to Xiao Qia. In the 2nd Battalion. Xiao Qia said silently, Big brother is big brother. This arrangement is almost straightforward. Xiao Qia had a wait in the battlefield after Duanzhou battle. He is not harmonious with the North Rail riding, and the two sides can slowly adapt. Just like this time, no soldier will refuse a general who can bring himself to victory, not to mention Xiao Qia not only has a clear reward and punishment, but also must do what he says. However, if he wanted to use the North Rail completely, he had to pass Guowei's Pass, otherwise his misalignment would be a disaster. Shen Zichuan was sleepy indoors. He half-concentrated his eyes and whispered, Suan, Haina Baichuan, Rong Nai De One, this is the opportunity your big brother gave you. Xiao Qia was in the dim light, thinking of the bonfire in the snow. Xiao Fengshu held his fist right in front of him, and Dad asked him in the flash of fire. You want this position, but are you really qualified? The author has something to say. It's late. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. Hassan stood in the wild, and the girl who could not see the distance jumped off the horse. He did not remove the knife, and opened his arms steadily to catch the red shadow that rushed at himself. Hassan stood in the wild, and the girl who could not see the distance jumped off the horse. He did not remove the knife, and opened his arms steadily to catch the red shadow that rushed at himself. Dohiran breathed lightly, flying in a red dress among the rotations, and the laughter was clear. God bless my eagle! Hassan hugged his new wife and blushed. He blasted the snow for Doran and said, God bless my Doran. Hassan got married at the beginning of the year, which is a reward given by Amor. His favorite doll is a girl in the deer department in the deep desert. She wears a jujube-colored skirt with hundreds of faces. She is as beautiful as the morning dew on the shore of Chidi Lake. She is the 12th strongest pony. Reverse. Doran looked at Hassan and said, Bayan violated his promise to me, and you lost weight. Hassan laughed. He can't always stay with me. Then he shouldn't have promised me. Duran landed, holding Hassan's hand. I brought fresh goat's milk. It's too far. Hassan was led away by Doran, and he looked at Doran. The next time I changed to Chagan to do these things. Hassan rested just 2 days after his marriage, and returned to the battlefield. It was difficult for Doran to meet him once, and he could only meet Hassan here by chance of delivering supplies. She cheerfully showed the food brought to Hassan. Hassan gorged and ate all the dough she had made. I want to come here to see you. Durlan was sitting on a sack and watching Hassan eat. I miss you very much, just like Chun Lu misses the sun. Will you go back when it snows? Hassan drank cold milk and met Duran's gaze. Do Erlin's pupil color is very light cyan. Every time Hassan looked in, it was like looking into the clear waves of Chi Ti Lake. He would think of everything beautiful, which made him unable to say no to Doran. He touched Dorlin's cheek lovingly and said, If the battle can be finished. You avenged Guggenha's. Father, thank you. You are not only the Soviet Union and Japan of the Serpent Department, but also the Soviet Union and Japan of the Hulu Department. Doran held his face. Hongyan Mountain, I will always wait for you in Chidi Lake. The eagle, that Durlan said was more like a pet name. Only her and Hassan's mother could call him in the entire desert, and Hassan would be shy. Gaganhuz is the brother of Doran, or the brother of Hassan killed by Xiao Fengshu. The wind in the wild was too cold. After drinking milk, Hassan returned to the camp with Doran. The tent was on fire, and Doran was here to make milk tea for Hassan. They all liked brown tea. If the Huiyan department is still there, Durlan sipped milk tea. There is endless brown tea in winter. Hassan cut her barbecue, was wiping his dagger, and said earnestly, They will come back. Talon will leave with the team tomorrow, so Hassan was not with the soldiers tonight. They don't get married, they break early. Suddenly snow in the middle of the night, Hassan was asleep, and suddenly heard the call outside the account. He got up carefully, put on his robe, and went out. As soon as the tent curtain was lifted, Hassan was blown full by blizzard. He patted his robe with red hair and asked the soldiers in front of him, "What's wrong?" "Bayan is back." Hassan turned his head and saw the remaining cavalry. The sound of the bark, which has been rushing for days, rolled down from the horse's back and landed on the snow with soft feet. He didn't help. He grabbed the left and right water sacks first, drank his head for a while, and drenched his front plaque, only to relieve his breath. What happened? Hassan picked up Bayan's knife, looked at Bayan again, his eyes were dimmed, and he said firmly, Achi was defeated. Bayan rubbed his frosty cheeks and exhaled deeply. He was embarrassed and had mud on his feet. He threw the water bladder back into the arms of the people around him, standing in front of Hassan, and said, Shao Chia led us to the Chashur Tianking on the ice, where he killed Achi. He said, reaching out and pulling the left side of the saddle, and Achi's head rolled off at the sound, and fell down to Hassan's feet. Shao Chia let me go. Bayan's lips were dark blue, and he said with a trembling voice, He brought me back this. Hassan's lip line tightened gradually, a precursor to anger. He looked at Achi's head and his eyes lit again. Dead around, only the wind is still lingering. Hassan's inhaled chill swam quickly around his limbs, and he turned his eyes to watch the snowflakes flutter away. Duanzhou was occupied by wolves. They were there to shake hands with a Zhongbo fox, and Hai Rigu was also there. He became a slave of Shao Chia. Bayan rolled his throat and remembered the day he was left again. Bai Tiechi's fear of chasing, he said dryly. Shao Chia got a new sword, and the scorpion became a weed on the gobi under his iron ride. Hassan, the hammer can't stop him, that's no longer Shao Fengshu's iron ride. It wasn't Shao Fengshu's iron ride that long ago. Hassan suddenly turned his eyes and approached Bayan. The wolves need a new wolf king. Shao Jiming will transfer him back to the north. I'll wait for him here. Have his new knife. There was a sudden noise behind her, and Doran stood at the door of the account, watching them anxiously. Hassan calmed his anger, and he looked back at Dolan without smiling. He should kill Shao Chia. Hassan thought again. As early as that autumn rain hunting, he should kill Shao Chia. At midnight, the courtyard was silent. Shao Chia had just finished washing, and picked up the beads in the box by the candlelight. Shen Zichuan's folding fan was sitting at the table, and people were still soaking in the water. The horse will arrive at Luoshan in a few days. Shao Chia singled out the agate he put in yesterday, and said to Shen Zichuan behind the screen, Would you like to go with me? Shen Zichuan was exhausted these days. Although he did not fall ill, he never encountered Yangshan's snow again. He immersed himself in the water and said, Luoshan has to go, and it's easy for you to go straight back from there. This day is going too fast. Shen Zichuan just talked about a few things, and it has already reached the end of February. He closed his eyes with his head up and meditated. His neck was beautifully curved, shrouded in glare across the screen, and bright in color. Is the candidate for the Duanzhou principal ready? Shao Chia turned the agate beads between his fingers and asked casually. Well, Shen Zichuan said, picked a talent. Shao Chia looked over and asked, Kong Qingfeng? Shen Zichuan raised his hand, supported his head wetly, glanced at Shao Chia's shadow, and said, No guess. Yuan Zhuo is inconvenient and inappropriate, Shao Chia said. Who else is there? Shen Zichuan stood up and wiped the water with the scarf on his side. Shao Chia didn't look this way. Shen Zichuan took the cleaned blue papa to the tip of his nose, sniffed lightly, and said, Shen Lanzhao. Duanzhou is going to build the thickest wall in Zhongbua, and because Luoshan is connected to Libei, Shen Zichuan is not assured of entrusting it to anyone. He has to stay here and build this wall by himself. To the south of Duanzhou, you can also bypass Tianfiyu directly to reach Bian County. Shen Zichuan feels that this location is excellent. A reserve station comparable to that of the state of Bees was established here, and he will be able to support it in the north and south. Do you remember Steel Needle? Shen Zichuan put the papa back with a bit of reluctance at his fingertip. He said, Xiao Tianyao is the best person to lead, but he still needs to take care of Yuanzhua state. But if it is replaced by Fei Xing, the emperor is far away here, and nobody beats him, I am not assured. Steel Needle is a light ride. It must be placed on the Chaosha River for ears and eyes, and stay in Duanzhou, which can be the center of the two places. Whoever is here to conduct the command, who is the key member who is in charge of both the military and the government, wait until after the spring. Yan's business expanded and there was silver in and out. Yan Heru was not an honest man. Shen Zichuan is not picky about Fei Xing, but how long Fei Xing's loyalty can last. In Shen Zichuan's heart, it is necessary to estimate. He cannot bet everything on life and death. It has been a year or two. When Fei Xing stayed here for a long time, I tasted the sweetness of the north-south intersection, holding a steel needle in his hand, and Yan Heru doing everything he could to the side. So today as life and death go together, how much friendship is left between master and servant. On that day, Shen Zichuan will no longer be Fei Xing's only reliance. As long as Fei Xing has a little thought, it is dangerous. Power is something that cannot be granted in this world. Qi Huilian warned Shen Zichuan as early as in Zhaoxin Temple. The cornerstone of surgery is called checks and balances. Controlling the heroes is like overlooking a game. Why does Huolingyun put in Jinhui? It was to replace Xiao Tianya's vacated position. He poses a threat to Fei Xing, allowing Fei Xing to beat himself. Similarly, why did Yao Wenyu make this suggestion? It is precisely to push Xiao Tianya back into the game, so that his vacant Shen Zichuan understands that Xiao Tianya is indispensable. As long as Fei Xing wants to go further, Shen Zichuan has to consider chess. In other words, as long as Fei Xing ascended once, Xiao Tianya will follow the dark rise once. He is holding Fei Xing's chain. Shen Zichuan will never let Fei Xing cross Xiao Tianya. Fei Xing told Xiao Tianya that Xiao Tianya was the most suitable person in Shen Zichuan to be the leader of Qingqi in Duanzhou because everyone knows each other. Xiao Tianya is a kind of friendship person. This is both the strength of Xiao Tianya and Xiao Tianya. Weakness. Shen Zichuan put on a wide robe to get out of the screen. Xiao Qie sat at the table with his legs extended. When he heard the footsteps, he shook his hands, hid the agate beads, looked at Shen Zichuan and said, "I just have something to tell you." Shen Zichuan's belt was loose, and her feet felt itchy when she stepped on the cymbals. He opened his clavicle and drank tea, nodded to Xiao Qie and signaled Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie said, "The Bianxia pony seized this time will also be put in Luoshan. If you want to ride lightly, try these horses. They run faster than the North War horses. Have endurance." Shen Zichuan held the teacup and thought for a moment. These horses can't be used from the north. Our war horses were all produced in Hongyan Mountain. They were born for iron riding. It took several generations to achieve a good horse that can now bear heavy armor. Xiao Qie opened his legs, allowing Shen Zichuan to be able to standing in front of himself. He braced his arm and looked at Shen Zichuan thoughtfully. "Let Fei Xing take a look at Bianxia horse here," said Shen Zichuan. "Just use Achi to stay here." "That's my racetrack." Xiao Qie pinched near Shen Zichuan's chin. "When will Shen Lanzhao be given to me?" Shen Zichuan was pinching his own strength, remembering the iron finger of Xiao Qie that day, and the hard touch of the iron finger Capricorn in the back of his neck. Shen Zichuan's breathing was slightly stagnant. He wanted to avoid his eyes, but Xiao Qie pinched him. The house was hot, and the star sweat floated on the side of the prince who had soaked in water. Xiao Qie stared at Shen Zichuan and got close and said, "I was excited when I touched you that day, Fujian. The author has something to say. It's late. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network." The monarch can shout, so it becomes more secretive in Xiaoqi Noguchi, like a secret word hidden in the large court, implying some kind of unspeakable joy. It is a sudden rising tide, which spreads densely and flows to the parts touching each other, exuding a thin sweat. The monarch can shout, so it becomes more secretive in Shao-chi Noguchi, like a secret word hidden in the large court, implying some kind of unspeakable joy. It is a sudden rising tide, which spreads densely and flows to the parts touching each other, exuding a thin sweat. The prince sat on the high position and despised the heroes during the day, and the folding fan blocked the rest of the emotions, which made him frosty, because he could see the danger sharply at a glance. But now, he opened his mouth slightly, biting Shao-chia's fingers, the soft tongue, the overflowing fluid, and the shame that was forbearing in the expressions, all implying the word delicacy. Shao-chia wanted him. Not only his fair neck, but his slippery tongue. The cocooned fingertips rubbed against the gums. Shen Zichuan had just drank hot tea and his mucous membrane was sensitive. His eyes were wet and confusing, and couldn't answer Shao-chia's words. The body fluid was exuded, and the tip of the tongue was searched along the fingertips. They faced the wall, and Shen Zichuan crept forward in the squeeze, with Shao-chia's chest behind him. This posture made Shen Zichuan feel like he had reached the top every time. He was holding the wall against his forehead, and his tears couldn't stop. When he buried his head, the back of his neck was exposed, again bitten by Shao-chia, and the robe underneath was wrinkled. Sitting on his knees like this, the initiative is in Shao-chia. If Shao-chia's nose is rubbed along Shen Zichuan's neck, it seems to be both demanding and coercive. He stared at Shen Zichuan's side face dangerously, and saw the temptation hidden in the corners of Shen Zichuan's provocative eyes. Shen Zichuan didn't know what had caused him in the corner of his eyes. He was so innocent that he hummed very lightly when he was bitten. But Shao-chia was so fierce that he became a leaf boat among the waves. He was beaten by the raging waves. In the dense sound of water, he was not even allowed to struggle. Shao-chia watched Shen Zichuan's tears drop intermittently, and he tilted his head and kissed the corner of his eye. Shen Zichuan sobbed in that kiss, accidentally soaked the robe, and then turned to look at Shao-chia, trembling, and said, I'll blame you." Shao-chia bit the tip of Shen Zichuan's ear and whispered, "Blame me." This one was so deep that Shen Zichuan couldn't hum directly. Shen Zichuan ate a few times, sweating, and the robe was wet. Shao-chia pressed him to his chest and wanted to kiss him. Shen Zichuan was too tired to lift his neck, and lazily poked out the tip of his tongue. Shao-chia held up, so he pressed Shen Zichuan. The tadpoles in this room are different from those in the home. They are not so soft like small fine brushes. Shen Zichuan's robe was soaked early and was torn apart by Shao-chia. "No," Shen Zichuan asked for help in sobs. No." Shao-chia pressed on him, including the soft tongue, so that he could only cry. How could Shen Zichuan resist such an attack? His waist was numb with soft legs in the front, and so fierce behind him. He was completely eaten by Shao-chia in his confused breath, and he couldn't speak clearly. His expression was flushed, he was embarrassed, and he said vaguely, "Flip, go to serene." "Shoo!" Shao-chia stretched out his arms and pressed Shen Zichuan's sliding hand, and his entire chest pressed on him, letting him all be trapped in the dense and fine fur. "How can you remember this crop?" Shen Zichuan half buried his cheek and whispered, You. Shao-chia took the tip of his nose against the wetness of Shen Zichuan, and his breath was pressed against his ear. The candlelight in the house had gone out early, the window paper was shining through the snow outside, and the branches that had been pressed down by the snow fell out. He was wet with Shen Zichuan, and he was getting wet too. Shao-chia was almost there, he was holding Shen Zichuan's hand and biting Shen Zichuan. Vague, dim, wet, and violent, Shao-chia always makes Shen Zichuan cry. Shen Zichuan said with tears of revenge. "I want to sue, tell your wife." You. "Well," Shao-chia smiled sullenly. "You tell him, you get excited when you see me." Shen Zichuan couldn't hold it, Shao-chia hit so hard that he trembled. He drew his fingertips and was approaching. The snow on the branches outside the window fell, and the night crows beeped a few times. Shen Zichuan was pinched on his cheek and kissed next to each other. The next few days will be sunny. As March approaches, Zhongbo will also have the breath of spring. The snow in Duanzhou had melted a little, and Gujin and Xuanzi cleared the road, and the official ditch of the repair should be reported as soon as possible. Because Shen Zichuan could not return to Cizhou temporarily, Yao Wenyu could only come to Duanzhou. He had difficulty moving, and the cars and horses on the road went slowly. Kong Ling and Yu Shao were waiting for him in Dunzhou, and then the three arrived at Duanzhou together. Fei Xing greeted outside, sent the gentleman in, and followed Xiao Tianya to count the supplies brought. When he came to see Huo Lingyun, he said to Xiao Tianya, "How did you bring him?" "Hanging the waist card is the regular editor of Geniwei." Xiao Tianya jumped into the carriage a few steps. "Should I bring him?" Huo Lingyun noticed her gaze and turned to look at each other. "It's dangerous to stay in front of you." Fei Xing turned his eyes. "Duanzhou is not busy. Who can afford it?" "I bear it." Xiao Tianya crouched down, touched the cigarette, and looked at Fei Xing in the gap between the fires. "You don't want to be wise, but be fooled, and think in front of the master." Fei Xing said unwillingly, "Since he came in, I haven't found anything. Why should you do this?" "What kind of anger?" Xiao Tianya sighed. "I'm telling the truth. You leave him alone without using it. Are you waiting for the master to use it yourself? At that moment, he will not be under your control. Now, Shen Zichuan left Huo Lingyun and did not kill him. He just wanted to use it. Now people are in front of Fei Xing. If Fei Xing keeps him so idle until Shen Zichuan becomes impatient, as Xiao Tianya said, then Fei Xing will not belong to him." Fei Xing glanced at Huo Lingyun again. "You came out of the sacred place in the 8th classic," Xiao Tianya said. "He is a monk halfway, not the same as the master's love and the Geniwei's love. Are you afraid of a bird? You alone cost 10. This mouth can also press him." "You're stepping on me." Fei Xing recoiled, thinking for a moment. This man has the ambition and ability. As long as he stays behind, it's a matter of time. Shen Zichuan is now staying at Duanzhou Jianqing, which is not a job that can be taken down by mouth. Fei Xing originally thought that this must be under his own control. However, Shen Zichuan directly transferred Yao Wenyu over, and Xiao Tianya also arrived. "You also have the ability," Xiao Tianya said. "It always puts your mind on this, but it delays you. What can't you see? The master can't run." Fei Xing didn't want to talk to Xiao Tianya about this matter. He just asked, "Why did you get it again?" "It's okay." Xiao Tianya went out and didn't continue to say. Shen Zichuan folded the fan upside down and tapped gently on the table. He replaced the new earrings, and the agate beads were white, which was too eye-catching, so that others did not dare to chase them. "I copied a copy of Luo Mu's account book." Yu Shao presented the book to Shen Zichuan again, and asked the prince to look over. Shen Zichuan looked at his account and said, "Spring plowing immediately, looking at picking someone in the past, Zun Lomu office work. He is alone, running on both ends is hard. This means that Luo Mu can no longer be the only one in Chazhou this year. He must send a person to hold him in the past." "Then I have a personal choice," Kong Ling said on the side. "This time, I went to Dengzhou at the command of the governor, and I met an old man there." "Suan's old man?" Shen Zichuan closed his account and thought about it. "What is Shao Qia's acquaintance in Fanzhou?" Kong Ling reminded him. "Wang Xian, do you still remember the governor? Originally, he was the principal of the Hudu ministry, and during the 8 years of Xianda, he was responsible for the expenses of the embargo." Shen Zichuan then remembered it. Speaking of this Wang Xian, he was originally at odds with Shao Qia and dealt with the issue of Quanqing silk. He was trapped in the assassination case by Xiang Yungo to bribe Shao Qia, so he was degraded. Before leaving the capital, Shao Qia went to the household to leave the relationship, so that he did not completely lose his official position, but only put it in China Bo to do things. Let alone Shen Zichuan, Shao Qia had forgotten it. When Wang Xian arrived in Dengzhou, it didn't take long for him to be attacked by bandit. He pretended to be crazy and escaped from Yemen. He was trapped in Dengzhou with the exiles. Until Yang Qiu died, Kong Ling went to inspect the Yemen again. According to Eri, this person should have come to Artsizhou, but something happened immediately, Kong Ling said. The Hubu changed his job and let him go down to Dengzhou. He suffered a lot in Dengzhou, and when he saw me, he still remembered the kindness between the prince and the second grandfather. Shen Zichuan thought about it for a while and said, since he is willing, he sent him to Chazhou. He was originally an official of the Ministry of Household Affairs, and it is no stranger to come to Chazhou to co-organize taxes. Shen Zichuan's letter is not Luo Mu's. This is exactly what happened. By putting a tax-savvy Wang Xian in Chazhou, Luo Mu's books can be tightly controlled. The most important thing in Chazhou now is money. As long as he holds silver in his hands, Luo Mu can't turn the sky. It was still early, and Shen Zichuan put off the tri-state chores first and asked Yao Wenyu, "How many days is Yuanzhua?" Yao Wenyu covered his knees with a velvet blanket and said, "Thanks to the monarch, there is no problem. Although there is a road from Cizhou to Duanzhou, it is still far away. I am worried that you will be cold on the road. You can rest assured when you look at it." Yao Wenyu waited until Shen Zichuan had finished his cold, and then said, "I brought a message back from the prefecture to the prince." He paused. The rumors spread in Danqing a few days ago said that Pan Yi and Pan Yi had been dismissed and investigated. Submit to Dali Temple and the Ministry of Justice for trial. Shen Zichuan looked at Yao Wenyu with a narrow eye and said, "So fast?" There are 3 members of the Pan family in Danqing. Pan Xiangjie, Pan Yun, and Pan Yi are all ministers of North Korea and China. They are also married to the Fei family in Tanqing, and they are not small in today's family. The Queen also wanted to control the dynasty, and could not do without Pan as support. For this reason, Pan Ji's dismissal was the loss of the Queen. As soon as Liang Xiushan followed Xue Xiuzhua to Danqing, he began to check the accounts, said Yao Wenyu. They didn't want the original account presented by Pan Yi, but sent someone directly to take a personal measurement. Pan Yi originally thought that Pan Xiangjie and Helian Ho were the security guards, as well as Liang Yeshan, who was assigned by Pan Mao, and this time the audit of the accounts could fool it, at least through this spring, but Liang Yeshan was looking for the account. In the meantime, there was a broken bullet for Xue Xiuzhua, who wanted to check the Quanqing account, but it was rejected by Kong Yen. Kong Ling said. Shen Zichuan's folding fan was fixed on the table, and he slowly frowned, saying, "It was less than a year after the Tai Shui storm last year, and Kong Yi and Sin Yu have been written down in it. At that time, Xue Xiuzhua was at odds with each other. Why is it so fast?" Juixi Governor Food Road also went to jail, which involved the problem of Liqing's account. It was said that the tariffs were tricky. Now he is impeached by the Metropolitan Institute, and even Liqing has also suffered twists and turns. Yao Wenyu came from a family and compared the line between them. Others were keen, and he said, "The governor's road in Jueshi has nothing to do with Wuqing, but all the procuratorates were impeached together." Helian Hu of Tanqing is close to Huasher, said Shen Zichuan, but regardless of his account, Sin Yu is now impeached, indicating that Helian Hu has a handle in Sin Yu's hands. He rubbed his fingers against the fan and thought about it. It's strange. Where is Yen Haru? Call him. Kong Shikan and Xue Xiuzhua shook hands and made peace, and there must be a reason for this. Shen Zichuan's eyes were blocked out of the capital city, but he must always know what he is doing. If Pan Yen is really dealt with as a result, it not only means that the family is frustrated, but also means that in the battle for Pudu, the Queen has been singled out. As soon as Yen Haru's was next to the stool, he kept rushing. "I am strangled to death in a few days. Fujuan, if you do ent call me, then I will ent let me go out. Qidong's military rations have not been delivered yet. I know anxious, the flames were rushing. This Duanzhou was too broken. Would you like to have a mat? It hurts to sit on the bottom." Yen Haru gradually shut up in Shin Zichuan's eyes. He moved his body. Bribery, Yen Haru whispered. What else can Helianhu do? He is an idle marquis who runs around for his son's future, and loves to send something on weekdays. Isn't Liang Yenshan going to dancing? Helianho was caught in the door by the door, and asked the Jueshi Duliang Road to send a bag of gold to Liang Yishan. Didn't it just hit someone's hands? I said that Liang Yishan was not easy to rectify. Qingshan away, this is all right, Helianho. This bag of gold broke a bunch of people. Bringing a bribe? Yao Wenyu said suddenly. He looked at Shen Zichuan. Pan Jianken assigned Liang Yishan to treat Liang Yishan as his confidant, so why would Helianhu paint a snake and give him gold? He is stupid. Yen Haru knocked on the tea lid, remembering that Fei Xing struck his head, remembering his revenge. Feis are stupid, and his head is not bright. Then the little prince Fei has reached the crown and is idle. How can the family do the trick? Helian Hohohao followed the queen mother, and Hua Xiqian didn't die when he fell. Shin Zichuan's eyes lightened. He just wants to grasp Liang Keishan, and shouldn't give Liang Keishan gold, and he should turn to Duliang Road, which is simply just send himself to Liang Yunshan. What does he plan for? Who knows what he is trying to do? Yen Haru turned his eyes, followed by sitting straight, lying on the table, showing a surprised expression to Shin Zichuan. If it wasn't for Helen Ho, he would be too miserable. This led Shuexiozhua to walk straight home, and even Pan Pan's door fell into the water. Shin Zichuan's electro-optical stone fire figured it out, and the folding fan was snapped on the tabletop, so frightened. Yao Wenyu coughed suddenly. He covered his lips, drew the parchment and calmed down slightly, then said, Good plan. Shui Yanqing is good plan. The author has something to say. Thank you for watching. 2K Novel Reading Network. Today, the rain and snow are creeping in the capital, and the chill bones are chilling. Helianhu knelt in the temple, kneeling numbly, and his sleeves were crying. Today, the rain and snow are creeping in the capital, and the chill bones are chilling. Helianhu knelt in the temple, kneeling numbly, and his sleeves were crying. Then Shui Yanqing was shameless and shameless. In order to frame me, I used whatever means. Jushi governor's grain bribery. How can we be involved in our city? That's the situation of Zhang's Qingshan. Lord Qingshan. Helianho took off the official hat resting on his knees, and he cried, and Tsinshuani, biting me at this moment, it is clearly reprimanding the dissident, and teaming up with Shui Yanqing. They do it. Concerning the work of the go-going camp, Kong Baran still has to appease her, and the bad ones are all in style. You seldom use this kind of words to mourn your family. The queen mother was furious. You have to be really orderly. Shui Xiozhua can catch up with the accounting problem? Zhu Shidua Liangdao has been greedy in Tanqing. If this is not done by you, Paul, is he so capable? The hall was brightly lit, and the Gongyi retreated to the door of the hall. Only Aunt Liaoyu kneeled and served on the side. Helian Ho came to bear Jing-Jing's sin and wore a thin dress, and now he was trembling under the anger of the Queen Mother. As soon as Emperor Tianqian died, the Queen Mother filled the family with leaks in this position, and she was exhausted today. She sighed at Helianhu across the bead curtain. Helianho heard bad words, and hurried forward on her knees and said, The Queen Mother is angry, and now it is the best policy to abandon to protect the car. In any case, he must save Pan Yen. Pan Yen is Pan Xiangjie's sister-in-law, or a key member of the household. They broke Wei Huaigu last year, and now only Pan Mao can still stand in the household. If Pan Mao is lost, the family treasurer will be gone. The Queen said, You can keep Pan Yi and you can't keep Pan Yi. This Pan Yi is the husband of Zhaoyue County. Without Pan Yi she will be widow. For a moment, Helian Ho was sad, and Voldemort choked, wiping tears and saying, I am a father. If I had been forced to the Jedi, why would I abandon such good people? I am helpless. I would rather she be widow than let her be implicated. The Queen Mother's face in the bead curtain finally said, "You go back and let Zhao Yu and Pan Yi leave." The rain and snow outside the palace struck the palace eaves, and the Zhu wall was sinking into white snow. The ancient belle in Wanglu was resentful and hurried into the court hall. "Pan Yen has the ranks in his body, and there is no need to bow to the court judges. After Yongyi years, Danqing will no longer be rewarded for farmland, but now the total measured by the Ministry of Households differs from the number of days reported by Danqing." Shuexiuzhua sat upright, looking at Pan Yen. Pan Yi served in Danqing the prefecture government, concealed the extra fields from the Ministry of Households, and you presided over the taxation affairs of the Ministry of Households. The inspection of the vacancies of the field tax in these years has not raised any questions. I ask you, do you know that the Danqing field tax is doing fake accounts? Pan Mao closed for a few days, and his robe was wrinkled. He sat opposite the desk case, watching. Shuexiuzhua didn't answer. Shuexiuzhua confronted Pan Yen. "Pan Jian is not good at trial. This kind of high-ranking officials are familiar with the review process. Smart people will remain silent in the face of Dali Temple and the Ministry of Punishment." Pan Yen was obviously a smart man, and he was always silent about Shuexiuzhua. If the case card does not progress here, then the remaining 7 cities will have enough time to clear their accounts and clean up the pickles before Shuexiuzhua refers to them. Shuexiuzhua was dormant for many years before he had the opportunity at the moment. He couldn't let Pan Yen escape. Pan Xiangjie stayed the same, Shuexiuzhua said with 10 fingers crossed. The Queen Mother praised him as the assistant minister. After spring this year, she is expected to be transferred from the Ministry of Industry. This is a hint to promote him to the cabinet. You are deadlocked with me here, and all of him after spring examinations and assessments are bound to be implicated. Pan Yen leaned down and took a scornful sip, saying, "You persuaded the governor to pay a bribe, and took the opportunity to bridge the cabinet with Kong Kong. Now you want to take us, Pan, but because I let Yao Yuanjua go. Sister-in-law, what do you pretend?" Shuexiuzhua's look remained unchanged. He said, "Before Pan Xiang was the outstanding minister of the Ministry of Work, your Pan family invaded the people's land in Danqing. During Yongyi's reign, Danqing Bai Chaoqing complained of all injustices and was killed by 13 horses on Shenwu Street. His 80-year-old father was killed at the gate of Danqing City's Yamen. You're right, I did take you Pan Yao for Yao Wenyu, but Yao Wenyu is just an opportunity for you. Even without Yao Wenyu, Pan will have to repay the debt." Pan Yan's hands and feet were cold. He leaned back to the chair, avoiding Shuexiuzhua's eyes. In the first year of Xianda, the old leader of the Hage inspected Danqing Tian tax. The official under his name was Jiang Jun. It was my colleague in the position of the Ministry of Households. At that time, the problem of Danqing Tian tax had already surfaced. As a result, Jiang Jun died on his way back to Dudu, and his account book was missing. Shuexiuzhua said calmly, "Xianda's 2-year-old man recovered his account, and Hua Xiqian thought we had evidence in his hand, so he ordered the family to pay the tax. You are not willing to pay from the private treasury. In order to supplement the money, the invasion intensified in the 8 cities. That year, 7 families in Danqing swallowed medicine and committed suicide. Do you know why? Pan Yi certainly knows why. That year, Hua Xiqian was forced to rush, and even Pan Xiangjie was also anxious. For this reason, while expanding the invasion of the people's land, the original land tax was distributed to the people in the city. These flat-headed people lost their food fields and had to bear high taxes. This is not a special case of Danqing. This is the normal scene of the 8 cities after Xianda years." Shuexiuzhua said here, "There are no other people in the hall," he continued. "Later, Jueshi was hit by disaster, Mountain. Do you know why Mountain refused to merge with Hua Xiqian at the time? Because his brothers are Jiang Jun. There is retribution in this world." Pan Yan's throat tightened and he reluctantly laughed and said, "Then you frame innocent people now, aren't you afraid of karma?" "Innocent? Jushi Dudao Road is innocent? He can serve as Dudao Road through your support, and then the Ministry of Households will give all praise and put it to Jueshi to check and balance the mountain. He is in this position with Hezhou Yen. She has exchanges, selling copper and iron for the two cities, and the corrupted tariffs can rebuild this hospital. Shuexiuzhua stood up, and the official robes looked dark inside the hall. Lian Ho has nothing to do. How can he be eager to pay bribes when he hears the suggestion? You call this framing, but this is just the surgery that you used to do in the past. Pan Yen swallowed his saliva and he became anxious, saying, You have tried hard to help Chu Jun ascend to the throne, but I'm afraid that in the end, it will be a bamboo basket to fetch water. My Chu Jun is called Li Jianting, not Li Jianheng. Shuexiuzhua supported the edge of the table, looking down at Pan Yen, and suddenly asked, Do you know the scorpion? Pan Yan's eyes were blank, and he refused to re-enter Shuexiuzhua's slumber with silence. Xianda's defeat of the soldiers in the 4 years gave Hua Xiqian a chance to breathe. Whether it was Shun Wei avoiding the war or the invasion of the border sands, God seemed to be helping the family escape the calamity. Shuexiuzhua said, This kind of thing, I don't believe it. Pan Yen didn't know what Shuexiuzhua was talking about, but he smelled danger. He could keep a close eye on the invasion of Mintian, but he could not rush past in collaborating with foreign enemies. Once this kind of thing starts, it is a disaster. Do you want to frame me again? Pan Yen said sharply. You take Mei Chu Jun and invite you to power, but you dismiss aliens in the DPRK, and you are doing private favors. If you are truly a country, why are you against Lu Guangbai? Who made the hands and feet of Bianju and Junliang? Shuexiuzhua suddenly dropped the confession in his hand. Who is Qi Dongjuan's encroachment on nearly half? You have repeatedly suppressed Qi Juin and let the One North family from the north, 120,000 iron riders to the northeast, without Xiao Qie, who can tie Xiao Fengshu and Xiao Jiming? You might as well ask yourself, how has the court always been able to make up for you? The Queen Mother has control of Chao Yi, but now he refuses to abandon his family to make up Qidong army. Shuexiuzhua's chest was undulating, and he turned his head to calm down a bit. I'm eliminating aliens. Shuexiuzhua looked at Pan Yen again. I want to uproot you residues and the scorpion. Yao Wenyu suffered from cold for a long distance, and fell to Duanzhou the first night. Shen Zichuan saw Yuan Zhuo feel sorrowful when he saw the illness, so he let the doctor stay in the hospital and die at any time. When Xiao Qie saw that Shen Zichuan was about to pass by, he said, Let's go together, I'll see him too. After the two men drew a meal, Fei Xing followed. Xiao Qie held an umbrella and walked with Shen Zichuan to Yao Wenyu's yard. Shen Zichuan looked at the eaves, and asked the maid who came to welcome him, Why don't you go in and serve? The waitress saluted and whispered, Mister, don't let anyone wait at night. Xiao Qie shook Shen Zichuan's hand and motioned for the maid to step down. He shook his umbrella and said, Yuan Zhuo has high spirits. I haven't seen Qiao Tianyao. Shen Zichuan looked around and looked at the main house. Knock at the door. Between them, the door was open. Qiao Tianyao, dressed in regular clothes, gave a little gift to the two of them and gave way, saying, Yuan Zhuo. Mister hasn't even slept yet, and he is waiting for Fu Jun and Er Yi in the house. Yao Wenyu was up, his clean face was resting on the back of his chair, and the book on his knees was scratched by the tiger slave. Xiao Qie leaned over to pick it up for him, looked at it by the way, and said, Atlas, there is a set in your study in May's house. Erie spent a lot of money, it's a pity that the house stayed in Chang. Yao Wenyu's voice was like jade. He had cleared up his fatigue and turned 4 wheelchairs to signal Xiao Qie to sit. Shen Zichuan took off his coat, looked at Yao Wenyu's face, and said, Long-distance travel, I shouldn't call you to the hall today. Recently snowing, I will have to suffer this way sooner or later. Without anyone else, Yao Wenyu and Xiao Qie are old friends again, naturally more relaxed than usual. He poured tea for Shen Zichuan, raised his hand and could not see Shen Yen, saying, Fu Jun is still thinking about the capital at this moment. Spring plow is coming. Shen Zichuan pressed his forefinger to the teacup, and the agate beads in his ears shook in the dim light. If the Danqing case is investigated, the remaining 7 cities will also be affected. This matter is related to the granary in Dazhou. Abandoning the soldiers to protect the car is a common method used by the family. If Shui Xiuzhua really rushed them, throw away a pan yen, Xiao Qia reposition the residual chess in the small case on the side, it is not impossible. Shui Xiuzhua this time killed 3 birds with 1 stone, used gold to pull Liang Yingshan into the camp, and pushed Dan Qingtian tax to the agenda, and also prepared for the future inspection of Yunqing tariffs, Yao Wenyu said. There was something wrong with Helian Ho, and the Queen Mother had a hard time. But Kong Shikan would help him, it must be more than one reason. Shen Zichuan watched the tiger slave run to his feet, quietly moved away, and looked at the cat and said. Qi Zhuin's eyebrows were sent to the fire mouse department. At this juncture, if Shui Xiuzhua was willing to give the cabinet millions of dollars, Kong Kuan would naturally not refuse. Tiger slave stretched his waist, put his paw on Shen Zichuan's boots, and stretched himself with his buttocks. It yelled "Mo Miao" a few times, squatting back and forth against Shen Zichuan's calf, and was pinching his neck by Xiao Qia when he was about to grab Shen Zichuan's robe. Xiao Qia looked at it and said, "Yes, I almost forgot, Shui Yanqing still has a pen in his hand." The tiger slave made a circle in the air and saw Xiao Qia. His ears shrunk, and he was afraid to move with his front paws. Xiao Qia threw it back, it landed lightly, turned his tail to the side of the four-wheeler, crawled back to Yao Wenyu's knee to touch. Yao Wenyu touched the tiger slave and said, Shui Xiuzhua added Qidong's army to the army this time, and the commander must also accept his affection. The Queen Mother will lose the opportunity to watch the fire across the shore. This matter is easy to solve. Shen Zichuan looked up at them both. As long as the Queen Mother points a marriage to the commander, Qidong's military power will be 2 points. Marry a marshal, Xiao Qia said. There must be a knighthood, and now the old men with the knights are not suitable and cannot be suppressed. Since Helian Ho has been dragged by Wu Qing, he has simply kicked him out. Shen Zichuan took Xiao Qia's pom-poms and placed it on the board. Isn't Xiao Ho Feisher still alive? He married the commander and became a vase at Qidong, and the military power was taken over by the Queen. Feisher is still a close friend of Pan Mao. With this relationship, as long as Pan Mao did not die, he would have a chance to rise again. Hua's married a daughter who has been living for nearly a century. Today, it is finally her turn to marry a man. As Xiao Qia said, abandoning the car is the Queen's usual method, but it is not only Pan Yi that she is going to lose, but also Helian Ho. Xiuzhua has been grabbed by Shui Xiuzhua, and Liang Qiushan holds the Qiu account. Since it is a city account, then let the city bear. In the first half of her life, the Queen Mother was at the mercy of her. Passion may not be desperate for her. Rather, she was used to being passive. There is only one supreme in the world. Since Chu Jian Li Jianting can, why can't she spend cranes? So far, Li has lost Emperor Guangqing, Xianying Emperor, Tianqian Emperor, and Yongyi East Palace successively in the hands of the Queen Mother. Xiao Qia looked at Bai Zi in his palm. If you lose again this time, Dezhou will really be changed hands. During the rain and snow, Li Jianting stood up in a cloak. She faced the Queen Mother across the snow curtain. The Queen Mother looked at the young Chu Jun, and saw the shadow of Emperor Guangqing from the eyebrows of Li Jianting, her husband who had held her half a life, and the shackles that had trapped her in the harem. Now she stood at the peak of 9, she no longer feared these eyes. The Queen Mother showed a kind smile to Li Jianting, thinking silently. Mess / Luan's evil species. The author has something to say. Thank you for watching. 2K Novel Reading Network. In the blink of an eye at the end of February, the Danqing case became a well-known large case in Pandu. Pan Yen spent half a month in the conference hall without any progress. The students in the room had a lot of discussions about this. They pinned their hopes on Shuexiuzhua, and there were more and more discounts for the impeachment of Pan Xiangjie. In the blink of an eye at the end of February, the Danqing case became a well-known large case in Pandu. Pan Yen spent half a month in the conference hall without any progress. The students in the room had a lot of discussions about this. They pinned their hopes on Shuexiuzhua, and there were more and more discounts for the impeachment of Pan Xiangjie. When the snow stopped, a row of Jueshi caravan also arrived in Bat. Xiao Wu was wrapped like a mule, but he was very dexterous. He jumped down from the carriage and stood on the level talking to the tax collector who was collecting taxes. The curtain at the back opened and Gu Qingqing, who had a short hair, walked down. Gu Qingqing raised the copper plate with his thumb and steadily caught it. He smiled at the clerk. "We are familiar with the goods coming and going. We also invite the master to appreciate his face in the evening. Let's sit on Donglong Street. My brother got your care last year, and I have to thank you for this." The tax official with the tax book knows that this person is a businessman from Jueshi. Last year, Xiaowu escorted goods, and the sea of silver that was delivered here. Now I finally saw Gu Qingqing, although it was the first time, but he was familiar like a brother. The sergeant jumped off the truck and arched his hands at Gu Qingqing and laughed. "I'm a muddy pen. How can I afford Gu to say master? You are the grandfather, you are our grandfather." Gu Qingqing returned to Lidu after a year and saw that the gates of the city were all cross-checked, and the road guides and books of the past caravans were detailed. He calmly said to the official, "How long does the brother have to stand here on such a cold day?" I look at the team behind. They stood by the side and received the tobacco handed over by Gu Qingqing. He had got a lot of ice respect from Gu Qingqing, and naturally he was willing to deal with Gu Qingqing. He immediately and half-truly complained, "Where is the closed city? If it weren't for other strengths, who would rather stand here? Don't you know that there are more than 100 caravans coming and going in this day, and there are so many sneaky sneakers and tricks thinking about ways to tax evasion?" "That's really not a thing," said Gu Qingqing. "Isn't it sincerely hindering the brother's office work? You are a man." Yili took the bridge in his eyes with Gu Qingqing. "I have been collecting tax and money for so long. It seems that Gu Yi is the best of you." Gu Qingqing patted the eunuch's shoulder and reassured. The official asked, "Gu Yi came here in person, right?" Gu Qingqing was smoking a cigarette. He used to stay in Jinui before smoking, but he couldn't do without it when he was repaying. At this moment, he said, turned his head to exhale the smoke, and said to the official, "Business is not easy now. Extensive investigations were conducted in various places. We had to go to Tancheng without leaving Tancheng. The transit tax on large goods was too high, and we thought about getting rich early." He said with emotion, "It's still brothers, it's impossible to follow the court." "Wrong, I look magnificent." "Gu Yi came very little," said the official, holding his cigarette, and said, "Some turtle sons, relying on a few stinking money, have eyes growing above their heads. They don't treat us as individuals at all. There are so many things that spoil us." The official's words are half true and false. Tax collection is a poor money. Businessmen from all over the world deal with the dignity of the capital of Tianzi City. There are few people in trouble, and those who know something a little will actively respect them, so those who can stand at the checkpoints to handle the errands are usually attended by someone from above. But it is also true that occasionally encountering such as it is certainly not to be provoked. Brothers are working hard. Gu Qingqing rushed to Xiao Wu and motioned him to bring the goods in. "That's the case. I'm waiting for a banquet in Dongyu Yanyalu." The brothers took the waste cards and went straight. "Let's have a good meal then." The official said, "Gu Yi is also polite, so it is better to respect him." Gu Qingqing smiled and followed the caravan into the city. Xiao Wu pulled the horse around and asked, "Qing brother, what are you asking them to do?" They are all little mice, and they are very greedy. The master said, fishing. Gu Qingqing threw the copper plate pinched between his fingers to Xiao Wu. How can I fish without bait? The city gate tariffs are managed by the Ministry of Taxation under the direct jurisdiction of the Ministry of Households. When they eat silver here, they also have to consider the weight, like the large amount of goods Gu Qingqing left last year, and thousands of private taxes. How can the officials have the courage to swallow it alone? They only dare to get rid of the odds. The big head still has to be the dad above. Gu Qingqing returned to the capital this time to order these dads by order of Shen Zichuan. Go! Gu Qingqing watched Biwa overwhelm Xinxue and patted Xiao Wu's back. Go and get our old house back first. Yao Wenyu's illness did not improve, and taking a few bowls of medicine was useless. On this day, taking advantage of Jin Yiwei's opportunity to test his horse, he came out to blow. Fei Xing was attentive. He prepared the screen before Shen Zichuan ordered it, and provided a charcoal basin under the shed, so that the husband must not be frozen. Shen Zichuan watched Xiao Qie standing at the forefront and was talking to Hai Rigu. He didn't look away, but slightly tilted his head and said to Yao Wenyu, Gu Qingqing has been staying in Jueshi for a long time. He still feels homesick. He comes from a duo, and there are relatives at home. The earlobe of the prince is clear and bright, and the agate slightly shakes along with the movement, twirling between the fur collars, looking thrilling. He is suitable for red, and those white furs who have lost their eyebrows are too amiable when necessary. Only red can make a sharp on. This is a sharpening process. The higher he sits, the more sharp the Tibetan Mastiff's sharpness is. The chief officials in the Dudu tax division are all family officials. Yao Wenyu refused to show half of his weakness in front of outsiders, so he covered his blankets and looked good enough. The prince wants Gu Qingqing to start from here, and he can borrow Ji Hongxian old story. That wouldn't work. Shen Zichuan watched Harry Ancient Horse, and Jin Yiwei on the other side also got on the horse. Fei Sheng was talking to Qiao Tianyao. He went on to say, most of Hong Xian's past is related to Shuexiuzhua. Xian Hongxian was able to enter the capital. Shuexiuzhua made great efforts. These mermaids and dragons are mixed, and they must be carefully screened before use. Pan Jiu was dismissed, Yao Wenyu said. Liang Yishan is the most promising chess piece. He wants Gu Qingqing to open a new path under his hands, only to be unable to keep up with the dancing case. We can't get involved in the dancing case. Shen Zichuan felt something was moving around his waist. He looked down and saw that the tiger's slave was stretching his paws enough to break his fan. But in the dancing case, no matter who loses or wins, it's not good for me. I asked Gu Qingqing to return to the capital, not to let him set off a storm in the dancing case, but to wait for a winner. Yao Wenyu didn't see the tiger slave, and his eyes were taken away by Qiao Tianyao on the racetrack. The recruitment criteria of Zhongbui Jinyui were set according to Qiao Tianyao. Today, he was dressed up, leaning down and hanging his arms to scoop up the running Ding Tao, tossed the bones behind, and hooked the collar of Li Shi with a whip, and also threw it to Gujin. Farming is over in May, Yao Wenyu said. Far north is still fighting, and the governor is planning ahead. The end of busy farming means the end of farming and other farming activities. The pressure on the cabinet has abruptly reduced, and there is enough energy to start confrontation with China Bo and Li Bei. Shen Zichuan must ensure that his line will not break. He had to support the supply of military supplies to the three parties this year, but lost the Cu family's copper mine in Jueshi. The Liuzhou port planned by Yenharu is only a prototype this year. If he is restrained by the puppet again, the battlefield will become dangerous. If Shui Yanqing wins, Yao Wenyu looked at Shen Zichuan. Where did the prince find his weakness? I can't find it, Shen Zichuan shook Suezi. As early as in the capital, I couldn't find Shui Yanqing's weakness. There was nothing he couldn't give up. He cut off from my hand the bank of Hongxian, but still willing to wear outdated official robes, run the field in the place. I admire him. Langtao Shulai hurried across the court, bursting into applause. Xiao Qia held the reins and smiled at Shen Zichuan across the distance. The chill in Shen Zichuan's eyes disappeared, and he turned the folding fan over. Quanqing's silk is also very clean. I can't catch him. But he is not alone. Xue Shui blew his nose with Pazi. He professed to be a Gao Jie scribe, but his actions were quite rude. He wore the official robes with dark and wrinkled corners. Now that Xue Xiuzhua is in the middle of the sky, Xue Shui has only mixed up a mess. In his early years, he lost all his possessions, and now he has to think twice about eating copper bowl noodles. Colleagues on the side were tired of Xue Shui, but did not dare to reveal it, saying only, "You are ill, and you do need to rest for 2 days in the house. Why is it strong? I will find you a doctor later." Look. Xue Xiui heard that his face was dull. He was a grandson bitch, so that he could not even afford the consultation fee, so he rubbed the parchment and said loudly, "I have a doctor waiting in my house." When was there a doctor? It's just that I've been busy with business recently and forgot about it. I'll call back today to give me a look. Colleagues know that he has a strong suit and is so poor that he beats his mother-in-law at home all day long, and the girl sells everything. They perfuncated in a vague manner, no longer controlling Xue Shui. It was dark at this moment, and the compound courtyard was walking. Xue Shui was sitting on the cold bench, facing the stove, trying to dry the wet boots, but the candle was blown out. When he was young, he was used to eating and drinking. He was accompanied by a girl-in-law at bedtime, afraid of darkness, and when he saw that the candle was gone, he quickly got up and hurried out. There were several colleagues standing in the yard, surrounded by a smoking gun, thinking about drinking for a while. Xue Shui hurried to the door and listened to them. "Can't you see this? I heard that Xue's treatment of his sister-in-law was extremely harsh, especially this Xue's." His colleague whispered, "At the time of Yongyi, the old Xue's grandfather agreed to let Yanqing follow him. Because Xueda is really not a piece of material, Mr. Chang Zong is said to be rotten wood and cannot be taught." Xue Shui was half-hearted, and he was so good-looking that he shrank behind the door, shy, and listened to them continue. "So Xue Yanqing is not willing to promote him now," someone said. "Standing in the door to make a mess, Yu is not as much as asking for food outside. If his family takes the title like Fei's, that's fine. Nothing. I think Xue Yanqing's Baoju are all clear from Hanlin Academy. Most of these people are Jinshi in the Spring Festival. After the hall test, they are all talent. How does Xueda promote? He knows the fart. Last time he asked him to sort out the old case. 8 words were misprinted on a piece of paper. They gathered and laughed. Xue Shui trembled his hands. He was holding his wet robe, and wanted to run out and scold the despicable villains who mocked him in the back, but he was no longer than he was, and without Xue's honor, he ate on this point and never eat again. Dare not to cover up like humiliating Pan Mao. Xue Yanqing calculated something. Xue Shui stretched his neck and took a light sip. Despicable bitch. The author has something to say. Li Jianting's Life Experience Guides 120 chapters, and the Autumn Rain that Hassan said rounds up Guide 151. Don't fight, don't fight, don't fight. Bio Love Love Cosmic Wave 2K Novel Reading Network. Langtao Xuejin is invincible on the racetrack. It is the uncrowned king under the Hongyan mountain. Xiao Qie stopped playing after 2 laps, and went down to eat the tea left by Shen Zichuan on the table. The temperature of the monarch still remained in that cup. Langtao Xuejin is invincible on the racetrack. It is the uncrowned king under the Hongyan mountain. Xiao Qie stopped playing after 2 laps, and went down to eat the tea left by Shen Zichuan on the table. The temperature of the monarch still remained in that cup. It's a rare day, Xiao Qie said, drinking tea and wiping his hands. Set a reward for them to play. There are ready-made rewards. Shen Zichuan turned his head and said to the maid in front, "Tell them a few, and outperform me with great rewards." Xiao Qia sat down, and his long legs were so crowded that Shen Zichuan was almost nowhere to go. He asked, "What reward?" Shen Zichuan laughed without answering. A few people on the horse race stopped, and the tiger listened to the reward, and he said, "This is our advantage. The generals from the north are all good at horsemanship, but the Zhongbua guards are not good at it. Gu Jin and Sun Ziyu could beat their heads, and there was no suspense in this race." Sitting on horseback, Fei Xing said to Qiao Tianya, "Will you get on?" Qiao Tianya held the reins and greeted Gu Jin behind, saying, "Are you a prince's face? Do you come down without a fight? Peach, come up and accompany your old brother to run this game." Ding Tao came across the reins and said to Fei Xing, "Don't be afraid. When you left the north, Jin brother didn't run over me. I'll block you for a while, and you will concentrate on playing the game." "I'm not afraid," Fei Xing said after seeing Qiao Tianya stepping back. "You can't retreat too, our brothers will work together." Qiao Tianya pointed his back with a whip, and Fei Xing took a look, and Huo Lingyun was also there. Qiao Tianya said, "The last road is narrow. Don't entangle with Xuanziyu. Just keep your eyes closed on the horse. Someone behind will block you." He is going to lift Fei Xing with Huo Lingyun and give Fei Xing the limelight. For a while, Fei Xing didn't know what it was like, rushed to Qiao Tianya and said, "You are my brother." Although Yao Wenyu couldn't hear them, looking at Qiao Tianya backed up, he understood what they meant. Xiao Qia held the teacup, looked at the horse farm, and said playfully, "This Qiao Tianya also gave way to Qian Qian. Horse racing is on the rise, and everyone just has fun, but it does not mean that Jin Wei can lose too badly." From both the North Rail Riding and the China Boss Army, Qiao Tianya still had to give the opportunity to Fei Xing. Yi said that Qiao Tianya had no ambition. Yao Wenyu grabbed the tiger slave and watched Qiao Tianya silent. Shen Zichuan wiped the folding fan a bit and closed it again. He looked as if he was well informed, neither talking nor anxious. Xiao Xing. Yin Chang stepped on the fence, sat up, and shouted at Fei Xing heartbreakingly, "Hurry up, hurry up! Win the old man and take you to drink." Yin Chang's words faded, and Gu Jin's horse raced like a wind. The old man ate a mouthful of ash, and was almost anxious to stand up. Gu Jin and Xuanzi's auxiliary vehicles are interdependent, blocking Fei Xing's road. Fei Xing was half a step slower and couldn't get past. The Ding Tao behind drilled, a few times, passing by Fei Xing, blocking Gu Jin's buttocks from the outside, so that Gu Jin had to slow down and gave up the road to Sun Ziyu. "Jin brother, do you have 1 or 2 silvers in your old boots? They are all soaked. Before I leave, Liuli at the door of our house is still asking, when will your credit for the wine be returned to others? I think it's awesome." Ding Tao said more and more vigorously, "I'll take the money out of your boots and pay half of it." "Half? How many or 2 did you credit? My accounts are all mixed up." Gu Jin couldn't bear it. He tilted his head and said, "Shut up." As soon as he was distracted, Fei Xing was knocked out of his inner position. Gu Jin cherishes his horses and refuses to squeeze them. The two go side by side, rushing for a while, and the is so cold. The road is wide and narrow. After crossing this distance, there is a slightly wider curve ahead. Gu Jin wanted to suppress Fei Xing here, and Fei Xing also wanted to surpass Gu Jin here. Both men closed their mouths and galloped in the dust. Seeing that the curve had reached the front, Gu Jin clamped the horse's abdomen, and Ding Tao in the rear had already withdrawn, and Huo Lingyun was on top. As soon as Huo Lingyun approached, Gu Jin realized that this man was riding well and felt more oppressive than Fei Xing. The corner turned abruptly, and Gu Jin's horse head turned sideways. However, Huo Lingyun, who was catching up on the side, suddenly accelerated, and the pony's thick front neck followed the direction, pressing Gu Jin inward. Gu Jin swiftly pulled the reins, but the horse couldn't stop rushing forward and was forced to slam into the innermost Fei Xing. Fei Xing's position suddenly narrowed. In order to avoid the collision, he tightened his right hand subconsciously and immediately turned his head, reached the fence, and slammed the wooden fence while flying. The warhorse was frightened, and the horse's hoof was caught by a railing in a hurry, and it was planted out of nowhere. Fuck! Hu Taihu stood up. The horse twisted to its front knee when it was planted, and Fei Xing moved quickly in the dust, and immediately hugged his head to protect his head, rolled to the ground, startled with cold sweat. Gujin has stopped, and he took the lead in dismounting, pulling up Fei Xing. Fei Xing stood on his legs. His robe was covered with mud. He wiped the sweat from his face, spit out his teeth, and said to Qiao Tianya behind, "Nothing." Huo Lingyun whips his whip, and on the sidewalk that is gradually narrowing, there is a tendency to surpass Sunziu. Xuanzi heard the movement and said as Huo Lingyun approached, "Isn't this authentic, brother?" Huo Lingyun half leaned down, like a sharp arrow breaking the wind. His momentum was too fierce, and he ignored the fences on both sides of the road, and allowed his calves to be wiped with bleeding marks by the wooden fence. Xuanzi's stables scattered sawdust on the fence, and he cursed harshly. The fence was affected by Fei Xing's road, and this half was crumbling. Xuanzi heard a bang, and the fence had been broken. He did not dare to die with Huo Lingyun any more, and immediately turned around and took the horse out of the road. Xuanzi took a sip, leaned down and hugged the horse's neck, comforting hoarsely, "Lao Tzu was slightly wronged." Huo Lingyun Rui could not take it. Mercedes was in the last section. He breathed slightly, leaving all the noise in the wind, and only the end was visible in his eyes. His future depends on fighting. No one is his brother here, and no one is his legacy. He knows what it means to be placed in Geniwei, but this is far from enough. His ambitions are all on the battlefield. He must find a way in front of Shunzichuan to be reused. Yin Chang was anxious to pat his thighs straight, anxious to spread his legs to chase the kid. He yelled, "You can't cheat. You can't." Between the electric light and the fire, I saw the horseshoe stepping on the flying mud suddenly, as if the lightning broke through the dust, immediately after Huo Lingyun. "Qiao Tianya!" Yen Taihu poked out the fence excitedly and shouted, "Qiao Tianya!" Yao Wenyu's throat was dry. Seeing Qiao Tianya's brazen hair in the wind and the boldness between his eyebrows, he seemed to hear the sound of cracking ice. Huo Lingyun's brow frowned slightly, and he looked sideways to see Qiao Tianya pressing up. Qiao Tianya pressed the earthy smell of the tongue and smiled shortly at Huo Lingyun. Both men lowered their predecessors at the same time, squeezing a pavement between the fences that were smashed to the west. It seems that Qiao Tianya rarely has the urge to win, but today, in this boiling noise, he is the Qiao Jialong who struck the capital 10 years ago. The noise between the racecourses was full of anticipation, and the shouts were fierce. The silk is hanging in front of it, and the fence is like a broken rope, which is turned over by the rapid sound of horseshoes. Huo Lingyun gritted his teeth, and the wind fluttered in the dust, and his idea of winning almost overflowed his chest. At this moment, the iron bar suddenly ran out in front, and the force of the frontal collision was enough to scrape the person to the ground. Huo Lingyun made a quick decision, rolled over, and rolled to the ground between Pegasus, avoiding the iron. But after he got off the horse he heard that Qiao Tianya was still moving forward, and he couldn't help but said, "Joe." The scarlet warhorse rushed over the iron, no one on his back. Yao Wenyu clutched the handle of the four-wheeler and his breathing stopped. In just a few moments, Qiao Tianya turned back from the side of the horse, and suddenly the scene was full of enthusiasm. Xiao Qia said, "Pretty." Qiao Tianya took off the heavy color when Jini Wei came, then laughed. His lost frustrations were melted by the sunny day, and at this moment became a shining sweat, sitting on the horse back with a good posture. Yao Wenyu's calm face showed almost no clue. He let go of his hand, but found that Qiao Tianya was looking here. Qiao Tianya retracted his eyes, dismounted and hit Fei Xing with his shoulders, blocking Fei Xingzhang's sight of Huo Lingyun, and Fei Xing said nothing. After they finished the game, they were rewarded by Shun Zichuan. Shun Zichuan was holding a folding fan and standing tall, saying, "Since the grand prize has been said, you can't use silver money and vulgar things to perfuse you. The position of the commander of the Duanzhou Genie Rider has been left empty." He paused and said, "Today Qiao Tianya." Sure enough, Fei Xing knelt down, sulking. "But here are all people." He can't look at the master, but frustration is true. He can only reluctantly invigorate his spirit and maintain calmness on the face. Fei Xing was transferred to Jinichi, and Hua Lingyun co-work. Zhongbua Jinyui was renamed Jinichi, and still has the power to report urgently. "You are not affiliated with the Duanzhou Defense Forces." "Huang," he said, "you belong directly to Mi Shinlanzhao. Private ride." Huantai Tiger looked at Calgary Jean, a little surprised. Everyone knew about the establishment of the Jinyiki, but they thought that this Qingqi would join the Duanzhou Defense Forces and be under the supervision of the Duanzhou prefectural government. Private riding means that Jini Wei is virtually unchanged, and is still a direct team of His Majesty Shun Zichuan. They are not subject to the inspections of the 6 states of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and even have the power to inspect the 6 states of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Unlike the progressive teams such as the garrison, they only serve Shun Zichuan. Xiao Qia set up a teapot, drank another cup of hot tea, and watched. It was getting late. He only said, "Clear the horses first and then return them to the stables. Take good care of them." Fei Xing immediately got up to greet people to clean up the screen and charcoal basin. Shun Zichuan and Xiao Qia went ahead. Yao Wenyu leaned down to hug the tiger slave, and when he raised it again, he saw Qiao Tianya standing in front of him. Qiao Tianya blocked Hua Lingyun's body, pointed to Fei Xing over there, and said, "After packing up the compound, it's on standby." The atmosphere around Hua Lingyun was not good. He nodded indifferently, bypassing Qiao Tianya. Yao Wenyu looked at the cat, and suddenly a color ball fell into his arms. He looked up, and Qiao Tianya was still watching Hua Lingyun. Yao Wenyu held the heavy color, and there was Qiao Tianya's sweat on it. The author has something to say. It's late. Thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. While the governor and the second grandfather were eating, Mr. Kong Ling had tea in the side hall and waited. Yu Xiao whispered to Kong Ling again. "Today everyone just hopes that everyone is in peace and harmony, so don't spoil the governor's interests." While the governor and the second grandfather were eating, Mr. Kong Ling had tea in the side hall and waited. Yu Xiao whispered to Kong Ling again. "Today everyone just hopes that everyone is in peace and harmony, so don't spoil the governor's interest." They all sat on the racetrack and saw the dragon and tiger fighting just now. Fei Xing was so prestigious in the Genie Way, and Shun Zichuan made a contribution in front of him, and Hua Lingyun couldn't afford to guilty. Kong Ling covered his mouth with a kerchief, put his chopsticks and said, "Since the governor hasn't spoken, this can't be troubled. Don't look down on Qiao Tianya, the governor loves him so much, he naturally has had human." Kong Ling knows Shun Zichuan's thoughts most clearly. This Marseille is a rise, but the reward of the monarch is not a rise. Fei Xing had the tribute to protect his predecessor in the past, and later had a record of attacking Fanzhou with the army. Shun Zichuan will definitely use Fei Xing in a more suitable place, but Shun Zichuan will not let Fei Xing be independent. He has to mobilize at the same time. Qiao Tianya and Hua Lingyun made the 3 of them an iron triangle that restrained each other. Today's Marseille is what the monarch expected. Shun Zichuan divided his private affairs from his official duties. From Genie Wei to Liuzhou, he was quietly constructing checks and balances. Shun Zichuan is not as strong and dazzling as Xiao Qia, but he always sits at the top, holding everyone in his arm in the palm of his hand, and letting them reach a delicate balance here. Kong Ling thought of this and couldn't help feeling. Qi Hualien is also the emperor. Shun Zichuan knocked chess pieces against Xiao Qia. They regained their interest in Yuanzhua's house last time, and now sit here to eat. Xiao Tianya was unexpected, Xiao Qia said. I think he is not fighting in Suzhou. He is still suspicious that he has realized the red dust and is about to be indifferent. I also think so, Shen Zichuan flipped cold chess at his fingertips. But life is full of opportunities, and there is no secret. Xiao Qia braced his knees and showed his ears to the government. Shen Zichuan lowered his son and said, Xiao Tianya is well known in Jinyi. When arresting you in Nanlin hunting ground, you can even use Jinyui's waistband without authorization. Ji Lei's treatment of him is evident. Miscellaneous in the capital, Fei Xing can be overwhelmed. Effort and energy are indispensable. The reason why he retreated in Suzhou, I guess he was hurt by Yuan Zhuo. But he wanted to retreat, Yuan Zhuo pushed him back into the game. Shen Zichuan hesitated about Huo Lingyun's whereabouts during the great victory in Fanzhou. At that time, Yao Wenyu proposed to put Huo Lingyun into Jiniwei. As long as Shen Zichuan agreed, he had to use Xiao Tianya again, because Huo Lingyun couldn't hold Fei Xing in Jiniwei. The two of them are a little bit interesting, Xiao Qia said of this, remembering a long-lost master of lights. Yuan Zhuo's Xin Yu is difficult to heal. Shen Zichuan slightly bowed. This is why Yuan Zhuo pushed Xiao Tianya back. Xiao Qia was silent for a moment and said, heavenly and talented. The atmosphere was slightly sinking. Shen Zichuan pushed against the candlelight and said, Yuan Zhuo's medicine can't be cured. Doctors come and go. No one dares to give a word. The poison that Danqing feeds was aimed at his life. Xiao Qia threw the chess pieces between his fingers into the chess box. After October last year, I can no longer find a master of light. I am in dying, I asked master. Master also said I do'n't know. When the master left the realm, he said clearly that he would go back to see the elder brother after the year, but now it's almost 3 months and he hasn't seen anyone. Xiao Qia's heart disease is on Shen Zichuan's body. Now looking at Yao Wenyu's weakness, he can't help but feel cold lip. He got up and opened the chessboard. Regardless of the chess pieces scattered around the table, he stubbornly touched Shen Zichuan's cheek. At the latest in April, Xiao Qia's eyes were deep, and Shen Zichuan was in the palm of his hand, and Shen Xing said, I will find a master even if I dig the ground 3 feet. Lanterns hung high above the office yard, and the slate was spotlessly clean. This yard is a new choice. A few years ago, officials in Duanzhou, Yemen took a rest yard when they were on a business trip. Now they are empty for Jiniwei to run a business yard, and they have opened up a few houses as the main hall. Fei Xing stepped on one of the stools and sat inside to drink. He was surrounded by a few brothers, messing up the food and drinks, squinting out. Huo Lingyun squatted on the steps with their backs facing them, eating dry food in cold water. He ate halfway and suddenly flew over a kuju, hitting his water sack. The water sack dropped to the ground and wet the corners of his robes. He swallowed the dry food in his mouth and turned to look at it. Jiniwei under the tree smiled at him and said, It's dark in the courtyard and I can't see clearly. Huo Lingyun reached out and picked up kuju, got up and wiped his mouth. Jiniwei teased Huo Lingyun and said, I shouted 1 or 2, and you threw it back to me. The man's voice faded, and Holling had thrown kuju out. That series of ling flew over the wall, and disappeared when it was a while. Huo Lingyun rubbed the snow and replied, The courtyard is dark and I don't see clearly. Fei Xing picked vegetables to eat, and without looking back, several Jinyui around him stood up. The other across the branch came across Huo Lingyun, smiled and cursed. Dog day, throw it so far you pick it up. One of the lanterns in the courtyard suddenly went out, and this side went dark. Huo Lingyun felt that he had hit his belly, and he rolled up his cuffs, followed by a punch. Step edge slipped, several people stumbled him, let his fist empty. The next moment, Huo Lingyun was overturned to the ground. He protected his head, and took a few more blows. Xiao Tianya stepped in from the gate of the courtyard, and his robes were not lifted. He kicked one with a cold voice and reprimanded, Everyone get up! What's the matter? Fei Xing moved his butt, looking down at the steps, looking calm. How did it get here? Huo Lingyun was still protecting her head, and was covered with shoe marks all over her. He squeezed blood out of the gap between his arms, and a carp lifted himself up. Xiao Tianya looked at Fei Xing, and Fei Xing said, "I'm not listening, Xiao Hua, why don't you call me?" Huo Lingyun's mouth was full of ice dumplings, and he spit a few more times, ignoring Fei Xing at all. A few years ago, when we received the waistband, Xiao Tianya ripped off the waistband of the former Jinyui and raised it to everyone in the hospital. He raised his voice. I said to his mother, "I want to be up and down and be a brother, all unloaded." Jinyui in the hospital did not dare to hesitate and raised his hand to remove the waist cards neatly. Jinyui's waist card is a status symbol, which must be carefully collected, not even borrowing. They wore a waist card in the scenery of Badu, and they wore a waist card with Shinzichuan in the middle of the bow. The waist card was their own face. Throw! Xiao Tianya tossed his waist card to his feet, kicked away without looking, and looked around at the crowd. Do you keep doing it? Throw! Jinyui threw his waist card on the ground, and he dared not stare at Xiao Tianya's eyes. Dejected, they stood beside them like clay sculptures. Fei Xing smiled slightly, pursed his lips and said, "You're too much to do this? You can't sit down and talk about it, you have to throw everyone's face on the ground and step on it." Whose face is stepping on? Xiao Tianya asked Fei Xing. Everyone's yours? Fei Xing's strong anger suddenly burst into high ground. He stood up and said, "He stepped on my face today? He clearly stepped on me. What's wrong? I should deserve to do it when I am 10 years old. Stepping stones? Yu Xiao Tianya is also good." Xiao Tianya said, "Go out." The Jinyui in the courtyard immediately retreated and evacuated, leaving only 3 of them. Fei Xing threw the chopsticks in his hand into the wine glass, and the unwillingness burned with the anger. He lifted his feet and rolled over the table. He turned and pointed at Huo Lingyun, saying, "I feel good about stepping on me, and the limelight is coming out, the master's reward is going to be grabbed, you have to take the old man's merit in front of him, this is so big." He said again and pointed to Xiao Tianya, and said in a cold voice, "Are you good with him?" Yeah, Xiao Tianya was passing over, even if you count. The candlelight in the hall was bright, Fei Xing was standing inside, Huo Lingyun was standing outside the black cormorant, and Xiao Tianya stepped on the black and white junction, blocking both sides a little. The crow of the old tree snow crowed a few times, and Fei Xing's chest was undulating, and he took a few steps closer. "I'm here to follow my master and run away, and you're going to me with a new dog." Fei Xing pointed to himself, his eyes turned red. "I open the door to the capital, Dunzhou Fuxianding is my guard, and Fanzhou was the one I fought with the old man. Why can't I do this position? Why should it be you, Xiao Tianya? I treat you as my brother." Xiao Tianya took a step closer and said, "Take me as a brother and say I'm counting you? I told you long ago, don't put your mind here all the time, it's because you can't run away." Fei Xing immediately said, "Shouldn't this position be mine?" The night crow on the snow tip suddenly flew, and the remaining lanterns dangled in the courtyard, pushing the shadow on the ground upside down. In a tense atmosphere, Fei Xing slammed into Xiao Tianya, stepped down a few steps, ignored the shout, and went straight out. He can't stay in a moment. Fei Xing left the compound, and no one wanted it. He ate a lot of wine, walked along the wall, slipped a few times, and his head was blue. Suddenly he squatted at the root of the wall, wiping his eyes wryly, not knowing who to call. Fuck. Fei Xing awoke a little, and he was blowing his nose, and someone was blowing his nose. Fei Xing stood up in fright, watching his head pop up. Yin Chong grabbed his sleeves and waited for him. He slumped a few times and said, "Why cry?" Fei Xing saw the old man without moving, and stood still without saying a word. "Walk around," Yin Chong whispered the frozen hemp feet, urging, "Find a place to drink, the pestle is cold here." Fei Xing was unwilling. He was mad with a temper and still had fire in his heart. Yin Chang rubbed his arm and said, I just got a tooth, and I was still angry with others. Fei Xing threw away the handkerchief, the face was cloudy, and finally he managed to squeeze out a laugh and said, I'm so angry with them. Yin Chang probed and looked at Fei Xing's expression. The lantern in front couldn't shine here, and Fei Xing stood with a sullen head. Don't show the old man at the beginning. Yin Chang couldn't stand the cold. He shuffled and said, Give him that position. I look at you and it's amazing. Bon Jin is so good at it, we can compare it with him. At Xiaobua there is no such ability. We still have a future. We have to fight with people here. Be careful to see the Fu Jun, and scold you carefully. Fei Xing stunned with anger. Yin Chang ignored and then said, You pressed Huo Lingyun so tightly, isn't it right? Can this convince the public? There is a Dengzhou garrison in Jinyi. Isn't it the heart of others? What is the commander doing? Yes? Let us manage the army, don't worry. Can this position give you? Fei Xing snorted. Jiao Tianya can go, Xiao Tianya can. Human Xiao Tianya really has this ability. Yin Chang said with a sigh, and went to the other side of Fei Xing. The old man was short, and Fei Xing stood a few short heads in front of him, and said, Look at him. I didn't it from you and Xizhou, but the prestige is still there. He advised you not to persuade you to keep pressing Huo Lingyun so old? Don't talk. I know, you want to say that you haven't pressed Huo Lingyun, but have you arranged for the errand of Jinyi? Fei Xing said, I'm his mother? I'm in charge of eating and drinking Lazarus. Yin Chang jumped up and hit him and said, You bastard, why don't you know the trick? What you do you know best. Pushing Fei Xing again, hurry up. Fei Xing was shoved. Yin Chang punched his and cursed, If you are my son, I will pump you. Fei Xing pulled his dirty robes and looked back angrily. I have a mother. Give me a good look. If you want this position so much, I'll go to the governor tomorrow and let you come back and see if you can't hesitate. Yin Chang took a few steps and said, I have an son. Fei Xing has never heard of it. Yin Chang is mixed in Xizhou, and he doesn't talk much about it. If my son is alive, he will be in age with you. Fei Xing was bored for a long while and suddenly asked, How did you die? Yin Chang squeaked on the snow, headed to the star, and finally could see some way. He narrowed his neck and said, Hungry? Fei Xing was holding the wall, and dare not pout with the old man. Yin Chang was mixed in the market when he was young. He came from a low-income background. He didn't know anything about craftsmanship. He didn't go to school. He wanted to hang out for food, and it took a lot of effort to join the army. At that time, the Yellow Book naturalization promoted by Qi Huilian came to Xizhou, and Yin Chang rushed into the garrison for the last loophole and stayed for 30 years. He spent a lot of time in the garrison. Although he was illiterate, he felt the terrain familiar. As he and Fei Xing boasted, as long as he was in Zhongbua, he would not go wrong with his eyes closed. The ordinary bandit was not his opponent at all. Yin Chang didn't want to mention his wife and children, because they both starved to death in Xian Danayan. That was the beginning of Yin Chang's alcoholism. He looked back at his past, thinking that he was like the mud under his feet, and he had never seen anything in his life. You follow the governor and have a future that is more promising than me. Yin Chang looked at the road under his feet. Shao Xing, you have to go down and down in your life, you see, and do it by looking up. You are better than me. The more wise and savvy the master is, the harder he is to serve. The governor can't get around, and he can't conceal it. If you have such a temperament, don't you know the governor? Didn't you just use you by your side? Talented. You stare at Xiao Tianyao, staring at Huo Lingyun, but they are all different from you. You are a smart silly boy. Don't be angry with them for this thing. It's broken the friendship with the governor. Future. Fei Xing was even more aggrieved when he heard this. He walked ahead and wiped his face. Fei Xing's father was Fei's partial housewife. When he arrived in Fei Xing, he couldn't even touch the side of the house. His dad had to bet that if he hadn't died early, most of Jin Wei's position would not have been secured. Fei Xing has followed many people. In order to get in touch with Helian Ho, Chungri carried a sedan chair in front of Xiao Ho Yi Feisher. Later, he followed Han Yen and was drunk like a son. He is not a gentleman, he is nothing, he just wants to get out of the way. The old man said, "You look down on Ho Lingyun, but I heard that he is also of good origin. Dad is a bandit. It is not easy to live. Don't always have trouble with others." Fei Xing said, "He grabs your battle. Give him." Yin Chang walked behind Fei Xing. When Fei Xing didn't know, he looked up at Fei Xing's back. After a long time, he said, "How many more years can I live? It's useless." Fei Xing is still young, tall and strong. Yin Chang stopped unknowingly. He only seemed to be able to come here. Even if he didn't agree with the old, he couldn't catch up with the younger juniors. Moving forward was another world. He watched Fei Xing go down this road and looked for a while. Xiao Xing, the old man is not prosperous, and his son hasn't supported him in this life, but you believe me, I think you have to live to be 100 years old and retire. You go forward. Yin Chang paused for a moment, suddenly shout, "Get up, go ahead." Fei Xing looked back at Yin Chang and thought the old man's eyes were strange. He has not been watched by his father in this life, so he does not understand the expectations behind this look. But he stopped and said, "You go too." Yin Chang laughed inexplicably. He curled up his messy white hair, exposed his vicissitudes, and said, "I am old." Jin Wei didn't get into trouble, even though Fei Xing didn't know what to do. When he gave Shen Zichuan the medicine the next day, he heard Shen Zichuan asked, "Did you drink?" Fei Xing saw that the governor was still approving the case and did not look up at himself, as if asking casually. He was so confused, he couldn't figure out what Shen Zichuan meant and could only answer truthfully, "Drank a bit last night." Shen Zichuan handed the approved case to Fei Xing and said, "Go to the hospital and pay the penalty." Yesterday was not Fei Xing's rotation. He had no idea and took the matter cautiously. "Not yesterday. Isn't it for you to recruit?" Shen Zichuan finally raised his eyes and looked at Fei Xing. "The roster has not been presented yet." Fei Xing first froze and then rejoiced. Holding the case, he knelt down and said, "Master Ming, I'll do it right away." The commander of the Jinyiki was given to Qiao Tianya. Fei Xing originally thought that his previous errands would also be transferred to Qiao Tianya to take over. This is an important task of review and recruitment. It is very important in the new Qingqi. Shen Zichuan moved his neck slightly and leaned towards the window. As Duanzhou neared March, the snow in the courtyard became almost clear. The thin light passed through the window paper and reflected in his right ear, giving off some gorgeous but tiny light around his neck. Xiao Qia was standing in the courtyard and received new news from Bajin. The author has something to say. Thank you for watching. 2K Novel Reading Network. Xiao Qia opened the bamboo curtain when he entered the house, and Fei Xing avoided the retreat. Xiao Qia took the cool breeze outside and put the open letter on Shen Zichuan's desk. He said, "In the second trial of the Danqing case, Pan's crime was committed by the villain in Zhuangzi. On the basis of Pan Yi's negligence of control, Pan was required pick it out first." Xiao Qia opened the bamboo curtain when he entered the house, and Fei Xing avoided the retreat. Xiao Qia took the cool breeze outside and put the open letter on Shen Zichuan's desk. He said, "In the second trial of the Danqing case, Pan's crime was committed by the villain in Zhuangzi. On the basis of Pan Yi's negligence of control, Pan was required pick it out first." Shen Zichuan read the letter and said, "Pan's encroached on the people's land. Danqing has 10 rooms and 9 empty rooms. As long as you check Danqing's yellow book, you know that there were thousands of people who were displaced last year. Can't stop the gap. Pan Yen manages the taxation of the 8 cities in the household department. How much is missing, he can't be unaware. Pan's people in charge of the field tax affairs have all gone to jail. Xiao Qie covered the light. All these people killed them because of their own delusion, not Pan's intention. Shun Zichuan gently rubbed the paper with his fingertips and said, Pan Xiangjie, this old man. Pan Xiangjie has seen the greatness of Hua Xiqian and Wei Huaigu. In order to beware of this day, he had already made preparations. The Dan Qingtian tax arrangements he arranged were all family members, consistent with Pan's interest. At this juncture, Paul Pan was protecting the lives of his family, and he would naturally shut up and plead guilty. Xiao Qie said, since Xue Xiuzhua dared to make trouble at this moment, he must have Pan's handle in his hand. He can bring Kong Yan and Sinyu on board, and maybe he has Dan Cheng's real account book. Shun Zichuan thought about it, but he didn't take it out. This case has already been reviewed by 3 divisions, and Pan Mao has also been fired for investigation. According to the procedure, as long as Xue Xiuzhua signaled Liang Qianshan to show evidence, they can win. Even if only one Pan Mao was removed in the end, the division of the current crickets is also important. Roll. I think about it. The only thing that can hold Xue Xiuzhua at this moment is spring plowing. Nico slipped out from behind, sprinkled on Lanzhao's side. Xiao Qie raised his arm to block it, and he was not allowed to peek. Jushi 13 cities are working hard. But Jueshi had no disaster last year, and the 13-city barnyard was enriched, said Shun Zichuan, unaware of Erlang's possession, and said, they did not allocate military food to Qidong 5 counties in the winter, but only replenished the granary in Badu. They should be returned now with spring plow reserves. What is Xue Xiuzhua afraid of? The original plan was of course no problem. Xiao Qie sat at the table and looked at Shun Zichuan. What if something goes wrong? Shun Zichuan got through at one point. He put his pen aside and said, it seems that the Queen Mother wanted to use Qi Juin to send troops to move the empty West Granary. At the moment, the only way to move the empty grain warehouse in Jueshi is to collect military rations. If Xue Xiuzhua walks his way and insists to continue to investigate at this moment, then Jueshi cannot do spring cultivation this year. The problem of eating hundreds of thousands of people is hanging on Xue Xiuzhua's head. Up, let him retreat. The Queen is a late striker, Xiao Qie said. If Xue Xiuzhua agrees to the ration of military rations, Jueshi Granary will be vacant. In order to spring plow, Jueshi must secondment to the 8 cities that have grain reserves, then Xue Xiuzhua cannot offend at this moment. His family, he has to stop investigating the field tax and make peace with the Queen Mother who represents the family. If Xue Xiuzhua refuses the ration of military rations, Qidong 5 counties' rations will not be replenished, and Qi Juin will not be able to send troops. Jueshi must not only bear the Badu granary, but also Qidong's military rations. If they are short of food during spring plowing, all prefectures and local governments must report to the Chief Secretary the food shortage. We must find a way to make up for the lack of food. Under normal circumstances, the Ministry of Households will coordinate according to the harvest situation of each year last year. Shanning will owe an IOU with the chief executive of the neighboring provinces and regions to borrow the food. At that time, everyone will discuss it by themselves to see if they can exchange agricultural products in China or buy silver. However, at the moment, only 8 major cities can be used to borrow food from Jushi. To convince the Queen Mother to borrow food after being emptied by the military rations in Xueshi, Xue Xiuzhua must have passed the tax on the 8 cities, and even the tax on the city of Danqing. If you have money, you can't buy any food. The tax on the land has already been solved. If you miss it, it will be even harder to investigate. Moreover, if this case affects Tai Xue's eyes, if Xue Xiuzhua retires, the students will have to write down on him. Shun Zichuan slowly on the table. The Queen is cleverly set, but she just played the pawns and made Xue Xiuzhua retreat. The Queen Mother also took advantage of the potential of Shun Zichuan here. Shun Zichuan's military supplies to Qidong were all stolen, by Yen Haru integrating Huzhou and Jueshi granaries, and then all were requisitioned from Jueshi. Jueshi experienced it within half a year. The rations were filled twice, and the granaries naturally could not afford it. Xiao Qie covered the top of Shen Zichuan's hair and said, "Shui Yanxue, who has nothing to do with, is dead." "There are still ways." Shen Zichuan looked up, and said to Xiao Qie purely, "If it was me, I would just remove the Queen Mother." In the past few days, the snow in Lidu has quickly melted, and the eaves along the street are running down the water. Fortunately, Guangzhou was newly repaired last year, and there was no blockage. Xuefu's position is not biased, but he is too close to the house next door, and the roots of both walls have collapsed. Xuexiuzhua has recently lived in Dali Temple. When he returned to change clothes, he saw that the courtyard wall had been renovated. He asked the supervisor at his home, when was it repaired? Xuexiuzua's family didn't pay attention to red tape. The supervisor was old, and he was still respectful. He said truthfully, "The old lady returned to visit Jean Gear a few days ago and saw that the wall of the courtyard collapsed. Uncle asked someone to fix it." Xuexiuzhua heard the words dim in his eyes, thought for a moment, and felt that his brother Xuexui's move was strange. Xuexui and Xuexiuzhua did not deal with it. After leaving, they quickly destroyed the remaining family property. Xuexiuzhua's light was doing idle work in the household and barely made a living. Where did he get his spare money for Xuexiuzhua repairing the wall? "Let the account room make up for him," Xuexiuzhua said. "Mrs. don't have to come to see Jeaner again." Jean Gear is Xue Da's sister-in-law. He is 8 years old this year. Xuexiuzhua kept up with him, and did not return Jean Gear to Xueda and his wife after Xue Dafan went out. Xue Dalai asked for a few times because he could not see Xuexiuzhua and could only give up. The supervisor said yes. Xuexiuzhua's baggage is light and lightweight. He does not wear polo satin. The most glamorous clothes are the official robes, which are easy to pack. He often lives in the office of the office. There is only a dumb person to follow the pen and ink. There is no maid, ordinary coarse tea and light rice. All are the habits of the household to leave the local field during the incident. Xuexiuzhua will return to run the compound courtyard after finishing packing. The supervisor gave him an umbrella and persuaded warmly. The third master lives in the compound, and there is no one to wait for him. The weather changes suddenly, and his clothes must still be thick. Xuexiuzhua arrived at the door, and Duer came forward to pick up the umbrella and spoke to him. Xuexiuzhua bowed his head, signaled that he knew, and turned back to the supervisor and said, "You will be taken care of by the head of the house. My Yuezhang will be returned on time. If you see anything to add in the house, just add it." Xuexiuzhua did not sit in a sedan chair since he was promoted. He walked back and forth. At the moment when he was instructed, Duan raised an umbrella and turned into a drizzle. When he arrived at the compound courtyard, it looked like Liang Minshan had been waiting for a while. "Master Yanqing." Liang Yenshan greeted him at the bottom, saluting Xuexiuzhua. Xuexiuzhua sent Dudu away and said to Liang Yishan, "Go in and talk." Liang Minshan took a few steps and followed Xuexiuzhua into the room. The light was turned on in the room, but the charcoal basin was empty. Liang Qiaoshan felt the chair was cold when he sat down. He had just seen the house while he was waiting. It was plain and simple. The only thing that was valuable was the pen of the old Yao hanging on the wall. Besides that, the tables, chairs and benches were all ordinary objects. Who would have thought that Xuexiuzhua could afford Qidong's army? Chongshan doesn't have to be constrained. Xuexiuzhua opened the window, sat down, and said in a warm voice, "Is this for the Dan Chengshan tax case today?" Xuexiuzhua is tall and upright, with a generous manner. It is like a spring breeze. He is now also a capital minister, but Liang Yishan is very comfortable in front of him. He has neither the arrogance of his family's children nor the prudence of the cold door, and it is easy to make people feel good when talking. Yes, Liang Minshan took out the tightly wrapped account book in his arms, Xiaoguan came for the Danchengshan tax case. Xue Xiuzhua is waiting for his following. Liang Yenshan went on to say, last time the Queen Mother made a decree, it would take Miss 3 to return to peace, and the commander had to accompany his father. According to the humble official's opinion, this is to urge the adult. At this time, the Queen Mother summoned Qi Juin to enter the capital, nothing more than to put pressure on Xue Xiuzhua, and the ration of military rations was still hanging there. Time was not waiting. Xue Xiuzhua said, the cabinet has drafted a ticket allowing the marshal to send troops to the Mouse Squad. The Queen Mother has been slow to approve the red. At present, the marshal is not bad at all. Liang Yishan said, the matter of military rations is still pending. If we drag on it, I'm afraid it will delay the spring farming in Jueshi. Xue Xiuzhua did not rest for a few days, but it was also difficult here. He and Jiang went to great lengths to sort out the books of the 13 cities of Jueshi, in order to avoid the situation where Jueshi was displaced like the 8 major cities. The Queen Mother took his weakness, which was really easy to move. Today Liang Xieshan is not here to see Xue Xiuzhua. Xue Xiuzhua is also going to see Liang Xieshan, he said. Chongshan is also in charge of the salt tax affairs of Hezhou and Jushi. Let me tell you more about Hezhou. This is to borrow food from Hezhou. Liang Xieshan was indifferent. He said, Xiaoguan is frank. It is really difficult for adults to borrow food from Hezhou. This year, the harvest in Hezhou is not fake. I can borrow people's food with the Yen family. Yen Heru is very difficult and he has a lot of money. He may not be willing to lend money. He is afraid that he will ask for something else, which will destroy the soup in Hezhou. Xue Xiuzhua was lost in thought. He is having difficulty with food, not money, and the most important thing is that he can't buy food right now. If he is worrying about Qidong army now, he can raise tariffs in Hezhou and Jueshi and get rid of them from the merchants, but the shortage is food. According to Hai Liangyi's plan, Zhang's castle peak was transferred to Zhongbua for recovery. This year we can also see a little grain, and then we will gather some from Huaizhou to solve the military grain problem. However, Zhongbua is now the site of Shenzichuan. The Tsihui tea commercial line has cut off a considerable part of Dazhou's grain. Waiting for the coach, Xue Xiuzhua said, I'll talk to the coach. The author has something to say. It's late. I saw a small boss who couldn't distinguish between Xue Xiuzhua and Xue Shui, and later replaced it with Xueda. Thank you for watching. 2K Novel Reading Network.